This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Matt Taylor.
We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of creativity.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
On each episode, we examine the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
We aren't. Find us online at artofdarkpod.com, and please support the show through Patreon or Substack.
You get tons of bonus content and now ad-free core episodes.
Thank you. Enjoy the pod. Art of Darkness. I'm Kevin Kautzman. Today we're going to go there and back again. It's core episode. This is the heart of the show. We love doing these. I'm here with Matt Taylor. Matt, how are you? How's Colorado?
Pretty good. Pretty good. There's it was extra windy the other night, and I took my kids and dogs on a walk, and there were at least 3 huge fir trees collapsed on top of houses.
Oh,
craziest thing. I have not seen that living out here for 20 years. It was nuts.
Yeah. We'll talk about that on the podcast by the docks, the weather control systems that they have operating. Yeah. I've been feeling especially schizo lately, but that's for the podcast down by the docks. This is Art of Darkness. I'm Kevin Kautzman. This is Matt Taylor, and today we're going to be talking about the life and work of J.R.R. Tolkien. I have some great stuff for you. Let me tee it up. I'm really excited for this one. I've got a big outline going. We're going to take the Tom Bombadil pill. I don't know if you have a strong opinion about Tom Bombadil. People are divided. We're going to talk about that. This episode, it's going to have it all. We got. I don't want to lead too much because, of course, I have to ask you a question. The opening question, Matt. But I wanted to start. Because demographically, this show seems to be appreciated by men of a certain age. I feel like we need to do a little outreach to the ladies. So I thought I would read a poem from a contemporary artist who rather famously wrote about rings as well. Is it okay if I read a poem at the beginning? Yeah,
please do.
This is from Beyonce. Okay.
Okay.
All the single ladies, you can say it back, Matt, all the single ladies. And they say that a few times, and then it's up in the club. We just broke up. I'm doing my own little thing. You decided to dip, and now you want to trip because another brother noticed me. I'm up on him, he up on me. Don't pay him any attention because I cried my tears, gave you 3 good years. You can't be mad at me. Because if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. Okay?
That's beautiful.
It's very moving.
There's an ironic juxtaposition on Frodo famously is tempted to wear the ring and shouldn't. Whereas in the Beyonce poem,
you should have put
the ring on.
That's right.
It's a shame none of the Inklings are alive to write papers on this.
That's right. Yeah. If anybody wants to write an essay about all the single ladies or whatever this tune is called, and as it relates to J.R.R. Tolkien and Richard Wagner, we have a Discord. I'd love to hear your sort of exegesis on the development of the ring as a symbol of power.
Yeah. And I would, if you're in college or one of our younger listeners, I dare you, that little Beyonce Tolkien ring thing, there's you could get a good 10 to 20 pages out of that. I dare you to do it and
do it. And send it to your friends at artofdarkpod@gmail.com. That's a surefire way to get on one of our dark rooms. This is a big, we'll get into it. We will, I promise, very soon. This is a big weekend for the podcast. We're coming up on our episode 200. We're going to get the entire band back together. Brad's going to come. Abby's going to come. We're going to even have Kirsten Peniel Colada, who does the show art, the psychedelic portraits that we have, and that's going to be a lot of fun. We have another dark room tomorrow. Then I have a little minor surgery in the middle of the week. But I love doing this show so much. The very next day, ripped on oxys, We're gonna do a Francis Bacon dark room with Max Thrax. So stay tuned. We got a lot of good stuff for y'all. You know how to support the pod, patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. That's the best place to do it. You can now do direct donations too. Just go to artofdarkpod.com. You know where it all is. Matt, what do you know about J.R.R. Tolkien?
Let's see. I know that he is probably hands down the Western world's most popular philologist. I don't know if you can name a philologist who sold more books than him.
No, I don't. I no, absolutely not. I don't think. I think he's probably the only philologist that is a household name.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Let's see.
Anything else?
He wrote, I know he wrote Farmer Giles of Ham. I know he wrote the Father Christmas letters. Let's see. I know he wrote Roverandom.
You're circling
Um,
around. You're
Sir
circling
Gawain,
around. Hmm.
Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Smith of Wootton Mature.
Why don't you listen? Why don't you just do the episode, Matt?
Sorry,
You can
yeah,
just do the
yeah.
episode.
Just he's just very into folklore and etymology, and yeah, and he is also probably of all the Western authors, if anyone's going to be, this is my little hot take here, but I don't think it's
Mm,
that hot.
mm.
If anyone is going to be like Shakespeare is 500 years down the road, remembered and still in print, I think Tolkien is probably the guy if you're going to put money on it.
I'll
Is
co-sign that.
right?
A major artist. Any final things you want to say before I launch into
No,
my
I
side?
mean, hey, listen,
Okay,
I've been
yeah.
into Tolkien since I was a kid. Uh, so I know good bit about the work, a little bit about the life, and I'm excited to dig in for the details here.
The life is incredible. It has it all. And it's a very inspiring story. There's plenty of darkness. Tolkien was one of the best selling authors of the 20th century. It's estimated he sold 150 million books or more. He would have a Wikipedia profile, even if he had never written "In a Hole in the Ground There Lived a Hobbit," for his notable work as a professor of philology at Oxford. It's a good school. But when you understand more about, and we'll go through all of it, his background and what he achieved despite hardships, it genuinely is an inspiring story. And if you're blackpilling on friendship or fellowship, this story will, especially I think, I'm sure for women as well, but that's that special kind of camaraderie that like-minded men can establish, where you have an understanding that despite ups and downs, despite falling outs, despite changes, that you'll always have each other's back. Especially for men of like arts and letters, there's a very moving story that we have on our hands here. Nerd, one of us, fellow nerds,
Oh,
uh, you know, get at it. And also, perhaps the most important or influential Catholic artists of the 20th century, and the Catholicism has a huge role to play here. And of course, we're talking about Catholicism in England, which is fraught with divisiveness and meaning. So I got to tease the After Dark. The After Dark episodes are episodes we do for more or less every episode we do that's quote unquote free. We do After Dark bonus content. You're going to want to sign up for Patreon or Substack to get that. This one's going to go long. We're probably going to have like an hour long After Dark because I got some really, really good stuff. If you sign up and you become a supporter, you also get ad-free core episodes too. So if you want to listen to this without ads for dick pills or insurance, uh, sign up, support the pod. We really value all that support. It makes every dollar that somebody sends us, it just sort of spiritually lets us spend more time devoted to the show. It's a boost of confidence. We really appreciate it. $5 to you doesn't mean much, but if you and 1,000 other people do that, it means the world to us. All right. So for the After Dark, we're going to talk about Tolkien's Catholicism, and how his faith shaped Middle Earth without devolving into mere allegory. And of course, we have this wonderful friendship between Tolkien and C.S. Lewis which is your next episode,
Mhm.
Matt. So I'm gonna maybe not go as deeply into Lewis as I would if I didn't know you were doing the episode next month. So I'll try to not cram too much Lewis into this. It's going to be more about their friendship, for what that's worth. So that'll be, and of
Okay.
course Lewis was the High Anglican, right? I believe he was C of E,
Yeah.
and yeah, and there was a little bit of a frenemy. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a frenemy thing, but there was some tension. I think Tolkien saw Lewis go on and write the Narnia books and felt like he was being imitated a little bit. Uh,
Ooh.
yeah, I felt like maybe, oh, so I have this best-selling children's book, and now you're going into your wardrobe and everything. So okay, all right, fine. But they were definitely, Tolkien had two great fellowships in his life. One was the TCBS, which we'll talk about, which was from his Birmingham days, and that was a major part of his formative years. And then, of course, he had the Inklings, which was the second great fellowship of his life. And he had one great love in his life,
Mhm.
which we'll discuss. All right. So also on the After Dark, he wanted to build a body of legend for England. And so, this interesting character who's a genius. Like, not every artist we cover is a genius. Like, I don't say that
Yeah.
lightly. Like, Tolkien was a genius of language and words. It's a bit pat now to say this, and most people are, well, not most, but people are aware that Tolkien's stories kind of emerged from his world building that pre-existed the stories. He had this whole conception of this idea of Middle Earth and multiple ages and the Silmarillion. There's all this huge folkloric backstory before he ever sat down and wrote, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." And this very concept of world building is something that he probably didn't like originate it. I mean, you have Lovecraft existed before Tolkien and everything, but he was the one who really made that's the expectation for high fantasy, right? You
Yeah.
languages and maps, and they have all this backstory, and then we drop you into the world and focus on a character like you might in great classic myths, but it's all backed up so it feels real. He knows where it all comes from, sort of. This is one of the reasons that Tom Bombadil bugs people so much, because even
Yeah.
Tolkien's like, I don't really know what Tom Bombadil is. I kind of stuck,
Yeah.
So, in any event, okay, a little more on the After Dark. We're going to talk about the Inklings a bit, a little bit about C.S. Lewis on the After Dark. And then somebody in our Discord chat, the link is at artofdarkpod.com, posted something from Far Out Magazine, dude.co.uk. Every Led Zeppelin song inspired by J.R.R.
Yeah.
Tolkien. So and then we're gonna take the Tom Bomba pill too. I got a whole book, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil. So that'll be fun. These are the main sources, the primary sources, and then a lot of I should say main sources for the episode, and then I have a lot of links. I've got the great Humphrey Carpenter biography of Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, a biography. It reads like a novel. If you find this episode compelling, buy this, read it. And then Carpenter was also involved in the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien. So we're going to hear from the man himself, and it was edited and selected by Humphrey Carpenter, and then with the assistance of Christopher Tolkien. And the impression I get is that Christopher was instrumental in the estate, the literary estate of his father, to the point where after his father passed, after Tolkien himself passed, Christopher published the Silmarillion. Is responsible for that. Cool. Are we ready to go?
Let's go.
Okay, let's go.
Go.
All right, so let's get into it. I want to get his full name, right? It is, where is my, it is, here we go. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. Okay. Yes. Uh, he was born on the 3rd of January in 1892. Here we go. So how do I want to start here? I mean, he invented fantasy. We're going to get into the life, but one of the easiest ways to explain what he was up to comes from a 1951 letter to someone named Milton Waldman. And I'm just going to grab that and read it. So we're going to start with sort of his fully formed idea of what he was accomplishing. This would have been after The Hobbit. So here, let's see. My dear Milton, and this is from the Tolkien estate, so pretty credible. You asked for a brief sketch, and I want to read this up front because we're going to arrive at this. So I want you to pay attention, Matt, and then everyone listening to sort of where he lands. And then we're going to go back and we're going to look at how he got here and how his life shaped this very important work of literature. You asked for a brief sketch of my stuff that is connected with my imaginary world. It's difficult to say anything without saying too much. The attempt to say a few words opens a floodgate of excitement. The egoist and artist at once desires to say how the stuff is grown, what it is like, and what he thinks he means or is trying to represent by it all. I shall inflict some of this on you, but I will append a mere resume of its contents, which is, maybe, all that you want or will have use or time for. A few more paras. In order of time, growth, and composition, this stuff began with me, though I do not suppose that that is of much interest to anyone but myself. He has this, an aside here, he has this wonderful way of, he's so English.
Yeah.
There's this, they do this thing where they're modest, but with cheek,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I can,
Polite. You don't want to hear about me. I'm the most
you,
boring subject on earth. Yeah.
and then 10 pages later, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've gone on too much, right? Um, but it's all with a wink. I mean, I do not remember a time I was not building it. Many children make up or begin to make up imaginary languages. I have been at it since I could write. Of all the people we've had on the show, he is the one who loves language the most. You might think you love language and words. You don't love them like J.R.R. Tolkien did. And that's not knocking you. It's just this is a singular mind of probably the century. But I have never stopped. And of course, as a professional philologist, especially interested in linguistic aesthetics, I have changed in taste, improved in theory, and probably in craft. Behind my stories is now a nexus of languages, mostly only structurally sketched. But to those creatures, which in English I call misleadingly elves, are assigned two related languages more nearly completed, whose history is written, and whose forms, representing two different sides of my own linguistic taste, are deduced scientifically from a common origin. Out of these languages are made nearly all the names that appear in my legends. This gives a certain character, a cohesion, a consistency of linguistic style, and an illusion of historicity to the nomenclature, or so I believe, that is markedly lacking in other comparable things. Not all will feel this as important as I do, since I am cursed by acute sensibility in such matters. I'm going to read one more paragraph because this is so important to get his voice in here. But an equally basic passion of mine ab initio was for myth, not allegory, and for fairy story, and above all for heroic legend on the brink of fairy tale and history, of which there is far too little in the world accessible to me for my appetite. He wrote what he wanted to read. That's a good piece of advice. If if you're going to the theater and you go, man, all these plays suck. Well, write a play.
Mm.
I was an undergraduate before thought and experience revealed to me that these were not divergent interests, opposite poles of science and romance, but integrally related. I am not learned in the matters of myth and fairy story, however, for in such things, as far as known to me, I've always been seeking material, things of a certain tone and air, and not simply knowledge. Also, and here I hope I shall not sound absurd, I was from the early days grieved by the poverty of my own beloved country. It had no stories of its own, bound up with its tongue and soil, not of the quality that I sought and found as an ingredient in legends of other lands. There was Greek and Celtic and Romance and Germanic, Scandinavian and Finnish, which greatly affected me, but nothing English, save impoverished chapbook stuff. Of course, there was and is all the Arthurian world, but powerful as it is imperfectly naturalized, associated with the soil of Britain, but not with English, and does not replace what I felt to be missing. For one thing, it is Its fairy is too lavish and fantastical, incoherent, and repetitive. For another and more important thing, it is involved in and explicitly contains the Christian religion. All right, so this is worth reading in full, but I'll finish there in order to get into the biography. Matt, do you have any sort of immediate thoughts on that?
It's interesting why he kind of felt that way about the Arthurian legends, and it points to something. So probably come up in dark rooms later because I don't want to dwell on it too much here. But what he thought symbolism and what myth really is, because he would say he thinks there's too much explicit Christian symbolism in the Arthurian legends. Like you can have Christian themes, but it's supposed to be a mythical realm, and so having a cross or for something that symbolically related to the real world, he think took takes away from it. That was his big problem with Lewis's work, is he had Father Christmas and the Narnia books. He's like,
Uh,
you can get the spirit of what that represents, but so that's fascinating to me why he thought that.
you want to be creating your own total world,
Yeah, and you can
right?
you can have a Christian underlying themes, but you want to
Hmm.
develop that through the myth. So you can't have a
Yeah,
cross. You can't
right.
pray in a chapel. You know what I mean? It's
Sure.
fascinating how deep he went with it.
Absolutely. Gandalf falling into darkness and returning as Gandalf the Grey, returning as Gandalf the White. I mean, these are obvious echoes of
Yeah,
Christian
exactly.
story, but they're not. He doesn't come back bearing a cross.
There's no churches, there's no crosses, there's nothing
Hmm.
like that, right?
Sure,
Yeah. So,
sure.
yeah.
Right, right. So good. All right. Tolkien's parents were English, connected to Birmingham, but his father, Arthur Reuel Tolkien, they make a big deal of that. The biopic is not that bad. It's not the greatest biopic ever made, but it feels very genuine, and I mean, it's very straightforward. It's just the story of his life up until he began writing The Hobbit. I would encourage people to watch it after you listen to Art of Darkness. Right. So his father, Arthur, had gone abroad to South Africa for banking work, and he managed or was managing the Bank of Africa branch down there. So I'm going to start reading from the biography. This is by far what I'll read the most from. On a March day in 1891, the steamer Roslyn Castle left dock to sail from England to the Cape. It's the Cape of South Africa, right? Standing on the stern deck, waving to the family, his mother, she would not see again for a long time, was a slim, good looking girl of 21. Mabel Suffield was going to South Africa to marry Arthur Tolkien. It was in every way a dividing point in her life. Behind her lay Birmingham, foggy days, and family teas. There's going to be a lot of tea in this story. Ahead was an unknown country, eternal sunshine, and marriage to a man 13 years her senior. Although Mabel was so young, there had been a long engagement, for Arthur Tolkien had proposed to her, and she had accepted 3 years earlier, soon after her 18th birthday. However, her father would not permit a formal betrothal for 2 years because of her youth, and so she and Arthur could only exchange letters in secret and meet at evening parties when the family eye was upon them. The letters were entrusted to Mabel by Mabel to her younger sister Jane, who had passed them to Arthur on the platform of New Street Station in Birmingham when she was catching a train home from school to the suburb where the Suffields lived. The evening parties were generally musical gatherings at which Arthur and Mabel could only exchange covert glances or at most the touch of a sleeve, which his sisters played the piano. It was a Tolkien piano, of course, one of the upright models manufactured by the family firm that had made what money the Tolkiens once possessed. On the lid was inscribed, "Irresistible Pianoforte, manufactured expressly for extreme climates." So you're getting a little bit of the background of the Tolkiens and the Suffields. Interestingly, Tolkien himself, J.R.R. Tolkien, would go on and have a similar prohibition put on his youthful love, where it had to be boiled down to fleeting letters. There are echoes in the family of this. So she arrives in South Africa. Um, and this is a letter that Arthur Tolkien, the husband, and they would live in Bloemfontein in South Africa. He wrote to Birmingham in 1892, "My dear mother, I have good news for you this week. Mabel gave me a beautiful little son last night, the 3rd of January. It was rather before time, but the baby is strong and well, and Mabel has come through wonderfully. The baby is, of course, lovely. It has beautiful hands and ears, very long fingers, very light hair, Tolkien eyes, and very distinctly a Suffield mouth. In general, effect immensely like a very fair edition of its Aunt Mabel Mitten. When we first fetched Dr. Uh, Stolreither yesterday, he said it was a false alarm and told the nurse to go home for a fortnight, but he was mistaken. I've had that happen. That's always fun. Call it, just call back. Okay. And I fetched him again about 8, and then he stayed until 12:40 when he had a whiskey to drink. Luck to my boy. The boy's first name will be John after his grandfather, probably John Ronald Reuel altogether. Mab wants to call it Ronald, and I want to keep up John and Reuel. Okay. So he's then christened in Bloemfontein Cathedral on the 31st of January, 1892, and I assume this would have been C of E. And some months later, he had his photograph taken in the garden of Bankhouse in the arms of the nurse who had been engaged to look after him. And the mother's doing well. And so there you go. All right. So he's born in South Africa, which I find fascinating. Let's see here. His younger brother, Hilary, you don't hear that name much anymore, was born there in 1894. And, we think of him as English, but quintessentially English. You think of Tolkien, you think of the Shire, you think of England, you think of maybe New Zealand because of the movies, but it's England, England, England. But no, he was born in South Africa. So yeah, so Mabel decided to go back to England. So let me read a little more about this. So Mabel's pregnant again. She gives birth to Hilary Arthur Reuel. Hilary proved to be a healthy child who flourished in the Bloemfontein climate, but his elder brother was not doing so well. That's our J.R.R. Ronald was sturdy and handsome with his fair hair and blue eyes, quite a young Saxon, his father called him. By now, he was talking volubly and entertaining the bank clerks on his daily visit to his father's office downstairs, where he would demand pencil and paper and scribble away at crude drawings. But teething upset him badly and made him feverish, so that the doctor had to be called in day after day, and Mabel was soon worn out. The weather was at its worst. An intense drought arrived, ruined trade, spoilt tempers, and brought a plague of locusts that swarmed across the veldt and destroyed a fine harvest. Yet, despite all this, Arthur wrote to his father the words that Mabel had dreaded to hear. I think I shall do well in this country, and do not think I should settle down well in England again for a permanency. Yeah. The heat was doing a lot of harm to J.R.R., and so Mabel took the two boys to the coast near Cape Town. Tolkien's nearly 3, and then at some point they return to England, but the father stays back in South Africa. And we're in 1895. In November came the news that the father had contracted rheumatic fever. He had already partially recovered, but he could not face an English winter and would have to regain his health before he could make the journey to England to rejoin his family. Mabel spent a desperately anxious Christmas, though Ronald enjoyed himself and was fascinated by the sight of his first Christmas tree, which was very different from the wilting eucalyptus that had adorned Bankhouse the previous December. When January came, Arthur was reported to be still in poor health, and Mabel decided that she must go back to Bloemfontein and care for him. Arrangements were made, and an excited Ronald dictated a letter to his father, which was written out by the nurse. So he's already this young, and he's already dictating letters, and this is what he wrote to his father on February 14th, Valentine's Day, 1896. Is that right? My dear daddy, I am so glad I am coming back to see you. It is such a long time since we came away from you. I hope the ship will bring us all back to you, Mammy and baby and me. I know you will be so glad to have a letter from your little Ronald. It is such a long time since I wrote to you. I am such a big man now because I have got a man's coat and a man's bodice. Mammy says you will not know baby or me. We have got such big men. We have got such a lot of Christmas presents to show you. Auntie Gracie has been to see me. C.S. I walk every day and only ride in my mail cart a little bit. Hillary sends lots of love and kisses, and so does your loving Ronald. This letter was never sent, for a telegram arrived to say that Arthur had suffered a severe hemorrhage and Mabel must expect the worst. The next day, the 15th of February, 1896, he was dead. By the
Oh,
time a full account of his last hours had reached his widow, his body had been buried in the Anglican graveyard at Bloemfontein, 5,000 miles from Birmingham.
wow. I was
Ooh.
bracing myself for that after the sweet little letter. Like, okay, it's gonna. Yep, yep. That sucks. Well,
Sucks. Sucks.
it's interesting. It wasn't that long ago where a fever would kill you and you can't move because of the climate. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I have a fever and I can't go back to. I bury him without a funeral or waiting for his family. How it
Yeah.
went.
It's
Yeah,
the sort of the bitter, darker side of colonialism, right? I mean, it
yeah,
wasn't a joyride.
yep.
Uh, yeah, kind of a nightmare. So now Mabel is a widow, a very young widow with two young boys. And, if there's one theme we have on Art of Darkness, it's that dead parents at a young age tend to show up. It's a
Hmm.
perennial theme on the
It's
show. Not always.
can be fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's fuel, and then you escape into, it's perfectly rational to want to escape into a different world.
yeah, yeah,
Like, and it can turn into, mental illness. It can turn into all kinds of other problems, or you can sell 150 million copies of your,
yeah. Of
right? I
a
mean, and it's, yeah.
just a
And
really
I,
detailed fantasy world.
sure,
Yeah,
absolutely. And then to love language and to love words and to just fall deeply into something. And I think it's a natural reaction to a shock like that at a young age. Um, yeah. And one of the beautiful arcs that I want to sort of iterate as we go through his life is just like how successful he was as a father contra this experience. That's another
right.
piece that's maybe it's like, do you repeat, not that there was a cycle of abuse or anything like that, but do you, without that example and being shuffled around, like how do you do it? And he pulled it off. I mean, these stories, what was The Hobbit? I mean, these were stories he wrote for his children.
Yep,
It's
yep.
beautiful, really. It's
Yeah,
very
well,
inspiring. Yeah.
he knows what it is to not have a father, and so he's like, I am going to be present for. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. I mean, and I'm going to be clear about it too. The church steps in a big way. Okay. All right. So we'll talk about this. Yeah. So he dies. Ronald was 4. Um, so I mean, you can sort of see this at the center of his storytelling and his life. Um, I mean, you think about the way that even the films conclude, the wonderful films. Are they perfect? Probably not. But I mean, do they perfectly represent the books? No, it would be impossible. But I think that they're the best we'll ever get. The Lord of the Rings films, the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings films, and it ends with Sam and his little family in the Shire, right? This idyllic vision of like family and a surrogate England, right? So um, after Arthur passes, Mabel settled with the boys in Sarahole. Uh, it's at the rural then, and I imagine it's just a suburb now, at the rural edge of Birmingham, and so not an industrial environment yet. And this would become a major landscape in Tolkien's life. This is the Shire, the
So
mill.
we're staying in England. They didn't go back to South Africa. That is that done?
No, that's
We're
done. We're out of
England
South
now.
Africa.
Okay,
Nope. Father is buried in South Africa. I don't even know if he ever returned. I'd have to look that up. It
okay,
seems he
okay.
may. I mean, it seems like you would maybe want to go and visit your father's grave at some point, but I never
But
encountered it. Yeah, 5,000 miles away. I mean, yeah.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, yeah. In any event, yeah.
yeah.
No, he doesn't. Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, this is sort of like the emotional heart of the Shire, right? Um, so let me see. When the first state of shock was over, Mabel Tolkien knew that she must make decisions. She and the two boys could not stay forever in her parents' crowded little suburban villa, yet she scarcely had the resources to establish an independent household. For all his hard work and conscientious saving, Arthur had only amassed a modest sum of capital, which was chiefly invested in bonanza mines. And though the dividend was high, it would not bring her an income of more than 30 shillings a week, scarcely sufficient to maintain herself and two children, even at the lowest standard of living. There's also the question of the boy's education. Probably she could manage this herself for some years, for she knew Latin, French, and German, and could paint, draw, and play the piano. Later, when Ronald and Hilary were old enough, they must take the entrance examination for King Edward's School, Birmingham, which Arthur had attended and which was the best grammar school in the city. Meanwhile, she must find cheap accommodation that she could rent. There were plenty of lodgings in Birmingham, but the boys needed fresh air and the countryside. So this is where they end up going to Sarah Hole out in the country. And they spend some time with the Suffield side of the family. And the Suffield, there was a contrast between the Suffields and the Tolkiens. The Tolkiens always liked to tell stories that gave a romantic coloring to their origins. The vibe I get is that the Tolkiens are maybe a little more eccentric and artistic and musical than the Suffields. Music plays a huge role in Tolkien, right? I mean, he was writing poetry. If you watch the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings movies, they do a pretty good job of, there are these musical interludes that come out of nowhere, right? I mean, and that's
Yeah.
definitely in the books.
Well, there's also the
Um,
songs. If you read the books, the Elvish songs, there's pages of that stuff.
yeah, yeah. Um, by the summer of 1896, Mabel had found somewhere cheap enough for herself and the children to live independently, and they moved out of Birmingham to the hamlet of Sarah Hole, a mile or so beyond the southern edge of the city. The effect of this move on Ronald was deep and permanent. Just at the age when his imagination was opening, he found himself in the English countryside. So we're talking about meadows. In one direction is Birmingham, in the other direction, looming large, is the shadow of Shakespeare at Stratford upon Avon. There's a mill. This is something that Hilary Tolkien wrote 80 years later. Well, here first. An old farmer who once chased Ronald for picking mushrooms was given the nickname the Black Ogre by the boys. Such delicious terrors were the essence of those days at Sarah Hole. And here's what Hillary wrote. You ever steal apples from the neighbor or anything like that? You ever run through
No,
yards?
no,
And
but
no? Oh, yeah, we did. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're lucky we didn't get shot at.
well, there's the whole
Um,
shortcut to mushrooms chapter in Fellowship of the Ring,
mhm,
where Merry and Pippin are stealing the
mhm.
mushrooms from the farmer. That's
Yeah,
yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
Right, plucked right from there.
Yeah.
Um, Here's Hillary. We spent lovely summers just picking flowers and trespassing. The Black Ogre used to take people's shoes and stockings from the bank where they'd left them to paddle and run away with them, make them go and ask for them, and then he'd thrash them. The White Ogre wasn't so bad, but in order to get to the place where we used to blackberry, called the Dell, we had to go through the White One's land, and he didn't like us very much because the path was narrow through his field, and we traipsed off after corn cockles and other pretty things. My mother got us lunch to have in this lovely place, but when she arrived, she made a deep voice, and we both ran. Okay. So we could dwell on this for a while, but I think you get the idea. Mabel soon began to educate her sons, and they could have had no better teacher. Um, Nor she an apter pupil than Ronald, who could read by the time he was 4 and had soon learnt to write proficiently. Unsurprising. His mother's own handwriting was delightfully unconventional. Having acquired the skill of penmanship for her father, she chose an upright and elaborate style, ornamenting her capitals with delicate curls. Ronald soon began to practice a hand that was, though different from his mother's, to become equally elegant and idiosyncratic. This is back when you had to learn cursive.
Yeah.
You remember, did they teach you cursive?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, they just should have, they should have had us typing. I eventually got typing, but man, cursive, what a waste.
Oh, really?
Oh,
I kind of like proud. I
yeah.
like slipped in there one of the last. I think we're probably the last few
Yo,
like classes that actually had to learn it. Yeah.
my handwriting would probably get me put into a lineup, man. It's bad. Um, so he's learning French, and he just loves language. He loves the
Yeah.
sounds. He loves the way words look. Um, she tried to get him interested in the piano, but he wasn't. It seemed rather as if words took the place of music for him, and that he enjoyed listening to them, reading them, and reciting them, almost regardless of what they meant. And I find that beautiful. Outside the schoolroom hours, his mother gave him plenty of storybooks. He was amused by Alice in Wonderland, though he had no desire to have adventures like Alice. He did not enjoy Treasure Island, nor the stories of Hans Andersen, nor the Pied Piper, but he liked Red Indian stories and longed to shoot with a bow and arrow. He was even more pleased by the Curdy books of George MacDonald, which were set in a remote kingdom where misshapen and malevolent goblins lurked beneath the mountains. The Arthurian legends also excited him. But most of all, he found delight in the fairy books of Andrew Lang, especially the Red Fairy Book, for tucked away in its closing pages was the best story he had ever read. This was the tale of Sigurd, who slew the dragon Fafnir, a strange and powerful tale set in the nameless North. Whenever he read it, Ronald found it absorbing. I desired dragons with a profound desire, he said long afterwards. Of course, I and my timid body did not wish to have them in the neighborhood. But the world that contained even the imagination of Fafnir was richer and more beautiful at whatever cost of peril. All right. Um, Nor was he content merely to read about dragons. When he was about 7, he began to compose his own story about a dragon. I remember nothing about it except a philological fact, he recalled. My mother said nothing about the dragon, but pointed out that one could not say a green great dragon, but had to say a great green dragon. I wondered why, and still do. The fact that I remember this is possibly significant, as I do not think I ever tried to write a story again for many years and was taken up with language. Yeah, you can't say a green great dragon because it would
Just doesn't work. I don't know
it
why.
well, it
Yeah.
makes it sound like it's a great dragon. It's hard to explain. It's like
Yeah.
a great dragon would be like its own class of dragon that's greater than other dragons. But if you say a, a great green dragon, you're saying the dragon is large, it's big. Yeah, it's strange, isn't
It's
it? I
also
mean,
green,
and it's
but
also
yeah.
green, but
Yeah,
it's
you
not
can't
some
mix up
special
the
class of, yeah,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But the former should work. Yeah, wonderful. Um, Now, very important here. Mabel had been thinking for some time about becoming a Catholic, the one true faith. Nor did she take this step alone. Her sister, May Inkledon, had returned from South Africa, now with 2 children, leaving her husband Walter to follow when he had completed his business. Boy, you'd think maybe don't leave the husbands in South Africa anymore.
Yeah.
Unknown to him, she too had decided to become a Catholic. During the spring of 1900, May and Mabel received instruction at St. Anne's, and in June of the same year, they were received into the Church of Rome. Immediately, the wrath of their family fell upon them. Their father, John Suffield, had been brought up at a Methodist school and was now a Unitarian. Ah, that old Methodist to
Uh-oh.
Unitarian pipeline. That his daughter should turn papist. Why am I reading this? It's just hurtful. I'm teasing. Was to him an outrage beyond belief. May's husband, Walter Inkledon, considered himself to be a pillar of his local Anglican church. And for May to associate with Rome was simply out of the question. Returning to Birmingham, he forbade her to enter a Catholic church again, and she had to obey him, though for consolation. Or was it revenge? She turned to spiritualism. She's looking for something.
Yeah.
She's looking for something mystical. Walter Inkledon had provided a little financial help for Mabel Tolkien since Arthur's death, but now there would be no more money from that source. I mean, this is
They're serious about this stuff.
oh yeah. Yeah, people still are.
Yeah.
It's mellowed, but I mean there are no two more anti-Catholic countries in the world than England and well, I mean in the Christian world than
Yeah.
than England and the United States. Although it's, it's mellowed a lot over time and it's changed, but there's still
Yeah.
one sort of bonus episode I should do for patrons would be I should do an episode on Jack Chick, about the Chick tracts.
Mm.
You don't know about Chick tracts? You got to look these up. They're these incredible, like hyper evangelical, and they're super bigoted against the Catholic Church.
Oh, I actually know of.
They're
I didn't know they were
hilarious.
called Chick Tracks, but I'm
Yeah,
familiar with them. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, yeah. Jack Chick was an artist. He was an American folk artist and a tremendous bigot.
Yeah.
That would be a fun episode. Maybe I'll do a mini episode on Jack Chick as a kind of revenge. In any event. So yeah, this obviously induces some strain. Uh, so Mabel would have to face hostility from Walter and from other members of her family, not to mention the Tolkiens, many of whom were Baptists and strongly opposed to Catholicism. The strain that this induced, coupled with the additional financial hardship, did no good to her health, but nothing would shake her loyalty to her new faith. And against all opposition, she began to instruct Ronald and Hilary in the Catholic religion. Huge part of the story.
Hmm.
And I wonder how much of that was driven by the loss of the husband. She's looking for something. Um, you're looking
It's
for, yeah,
it's interesting she's that strong-willed about it too. It suggests a genuine like this is what I'm doing. Because you think for a single mom of two children, maybe most people would kind of back off. Would be like, "Oh, you're going to cut off funding. I need it. I'll." But she's just like, "Nope, well, I'm doing it." Yeah.
yeah, with great like sacrifice. I mean,
Yeah.
money's at
Yeah. Like
stake. Your reputation is at stake. It's your
relations with your
family.
family. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm. Yeah. So they do end up uh, moving to Birmingham, and they rent a house in Moseley near the center of the city. The boys packed their belongings and left the cottage where they'd been so happy for 4 years. And those 4 years were really formative. And the biopic does a good job of showing you the transition from this idyllic countryside to Birmingham at the turn of the century, industrial, smoggy, and that plays out in Tolkien's work, doesn't it? You have this sort of
little Mordorish.
yeah, you have
Yeah.
this sort of the industrial, and then you have the Ents who are being destroyed and
Yeah.
harvested, and this sort of return to nature thing, and eventually when The Lord of the Rings was published, the American hippies picked it up, and the boomer generation adopted it as a almost like a rallying cry. People would wear buttons that said "Frodo lives."
Yeah.
It became a
Yeah.
big deal. Yeah, yeah, it's cool. I mean, then you have Zeppelin and everything, right? Um, so they moved to Birmingham. He tries to get into King Edward's, which is the big school there. He doesn't pass the first entrance examination, and then he takes it a second time, which is something that's echoed when he tries eventually to get into Oxford. Didn't get in right away. Second shot, keep going back there and back again. But he gets into King Edward's. King Edward's School could scarcely be missed by a traveler arriving in Birmingham on the London and Northwestern Railway, and for it rose majestically above the subterranean smoke and steam of New Street Station. Resembling the dining hall of a rich Oxford college, it was a heavy and soot-blackened essay in Victorian Gothic by Barry, architect of the rebuilt Houses of Parliament. The school, founded by Edward VI, was generously endowed, and the governors had been able to open branch schools in many of the poorer parts of the city. But the educational standard of King Edward's itself, the high school, was unrivaled in Birmingham, and many of the hundreds of boys who sat on worn benches construing their Caesar while the railway engines whistled below went on to win awards at the major universities. It's a prep school. I mean, it's a prestigious. It's a school where you're expected to get into Oxford or Cambridge or something, it's St. Andrews or whatever, something adjacent. Um, uh, so his mother rented a small house on the main road in the suburb of Moseley, and the view from the windows was a sad contrast to the Warwickshire countryside. Trams struggling up the hill, the drab faces of passersby, and in the distance, the smoking factory chimneys of Sparkbrook and Small Heath. To Ronald, the Moseley house remained in memory as dreadful. And no sooner had they settled than they had to move. The house was to be demolished to make room for a fire station. Mabel then finds a villa less than a mile away in a terrace row behind King's Heath Station. They were now not far from her parents' home, but what had dictated her choice was the presence in the road of the new Roman Catholic Church of St. Dunstan, corrugated outside the pitch pine within. So he's quite unhappy to be there. He misses the countryside, and I think they move again. And this is important. So she's restless. She began to search around again. She discovered the Birmingham Oratory, a large church in the suburb of Edgbaston that was looked after by a community of priests. So she's looking for a confessor. I mean, she's taking her faith seriously. And attached to the oratory and under the direction of its clergy was the grammar school of St. Philip, where the fees were lower than King Edward's and where her sons could receive a Catholic education. And there was a house to let next door to the school. So she moves them again, and they go to St. Philip's School. The priest there would play a very important part in his life. He does eventually return to King Edward's. He wins a foundation scholarship. So Tolkien is not a rich kid. Tolkien is like, I mean, and it probably doesn't get more extreme to be like, and well, we'll get to it, to be not from money at a place like Oxford or even King Edward's. I mean, it's like it'd be like somebody coming into maybe Harvard, and it's just like you and the children of them, and they do this, and it just creates this weird dynamic where it's like, your friends are off to, Martha's Vineyard for the summer, and you're going back to Ohio or whatever. It's just different
Yeah.
strokes in a big way. And I think that you could see that in the Lord of the Rings too. I mean, he's sort of surrounded by all these elves, and he's a little hobbit.
That's
I mean,
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, there's a definite class consciousness to it, when quite literally, which he shows through these different types of almost species, or
Yeah.
yeah. So he returns to King Edward's. He's in the sixth class, about halfway up the school. He's now learning Greek. He later wrote about this: the fluidity of Greek, punctuated by hardness and with its surface glitter, captivated me, but part of the attraction was antiquity and alien remoteness. It did not touch home. So he's studying, and now listen to this. He's studying under a man named George Brewerton, and he's teaching English literature. And when taught, it was confined chiefly to the study of Shakespeare's plays, which Ronald soon found that he disliked cordially. In later years, he especially remembered the bitter disappointment and disgust from school days with the shabby use made in Shakespeare of the coming of Great Burnham Wood to high Dunstan Hill. I longed to devise a setting by which the trees might really march to war. So he was not having it. By inclination, his form master Brewerton was a medievalist. Always a fierce teacher, he demanded that his pupils should use the plain old words of the English language. If a boy employed the term manure, Brewerton would roar out, "Manure! Call it muck! Say it 3 times! Muck! Muck! Muck!" It's great. He encouraged him to read Chaucer. Yes, okay, great. The new year did not begin well. Ronald and Hidden were in 1904, 1905 here. I believe 1904, yeah. Ronald and Hillary were confined to bed with measles and whooping cough. Hillary had pneumonia, and that took their mother out. By April of 1904, she was in the hospital, and her condition was diagnosed as diabetes. Now, this is where a fellow named Father Francis comes into their life, and he's been there. He's at the oratory, and so he's looking after them. He paid them many visits. He kept a dog at Rednall named Lord Roberts, and he used to sit on the ivory-covered veranda of the oratory house smoking a large cherrywood pipe. The more remarkable, Ronald recalled, since he never smoked except there. And I'm pretty sure Tolkien had a habit for the pipe.
Yeah.
Yeah, here it is. Possibly my own later addiction to the pipe derives from this. When Father Francis was not in residence and there was no other priest staying at Rednall, Mabel and the boys would drive to Mass in Bromsgrove, sharing a hired carriage with Mr. and Mrs. Church. Got to go to church with Mr. and Mrs. Church. Nominative determinism is undefeated. And that's so funny. Mrs. Church is the gardener and caretaker for the Oratory Fathers. Perfect. So September, school starts. Ronald's fitting well. He returns to King Edward's, but his mother could not yet bring herself to leave the cottage where they had been so happy and go back to the smoke and dirt of Birmingham. So I think they maybe moved out. So for the time being, Ronald had to rise early and walk more than a mile to the station to catch a train to school. It was growing dark by the time he came home, and Hilary sometimes met him with a lamp. Unnoticed by her sons, Mabel's condition began to deteriorate again. At the beginning of November, she collapsed in a way that seemed to them sudden and terrifying. She sank into a diabetic coma, and 6 days later, on the 14th of November, with Father Francis and her sister May Inkledon at her bedside in the cottage, she died.
He's what, 12?
12.
12? Man, diabetes.
At 34.
Wow.
I have to stand up. I'll be right back. Why don't you tell me
Okay.
where you're at with Tolkien? What do you expect from
Oh,
him from here? And maybe hint a little Lewis. I don't know. I'll be right back. 90 seconds.
okay. Yeah. No, it's fascinating that it's fascinating and sad that this is probably what spurs his dive even deeper into the depths of myth and fantasy, and in some ways trying to recreate the lost magic of childhood, which does have some parallels with Lewis. Lewis would do that too, or like he had things go wrong in his life and lost a parent. And he kind of is just almost, if you distilled it down to its essence, you could argue that he's trying to recreate the lost magic of childhood. So, I mean, I knew had been called orphaned. So it's interesting. It's the fuel, and it would wreck maybe, I don't know, 80, 90% of people. And for 10% of people, it's you know, it's
Sure.
what makes them
Yeah.
create their art.
I mean, and you can see not losing not one, but both.
Both. Yeah.
Uh, and why then that conversion to Catholicism from his mother, why he wouldn't revert to C of E like that. The
Oh, yeah.
Catholicism was tied up in this kind of maybe Freudian way um, to
Or
his
just,
honoring the memory of his mother.
it's the last, you could see, so you lose your father when you're 4 and you cling to your mother. That's what you know. Then you lose your mother and you cling to what was very important, obviously very important to her. She sacrificed family, money, all that stuff for it. So it's like, okay, so here's the next thing I cling to. Or it's
Yeah,
important to her, it's important to me, that sort of thing.
absolutely. I lost my father when I was 4.
Did you really?
I did. I
Yeah.
did. It's not about me, but I have special insights into what happens.
What that does, yeah.
I became a podcaster, which I'm doing far
I
more poorly than, but it does. It affects you. I don't want
I
to go too far into it, but it's a
sure.
thing for sure.
I
Um,
imagine.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
heavy thing. It influences your whole life. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons I find this story so compelling. I had no idea about this. None.
Really.
Do you know?
Yeah.
And why? And you're so right. Why wouldn't you? You would both drift into fantasy, but you would also like want complete and absolute control over the fantasy world. Why is
Yeah.
this character
Yeah.
named this?
Yeah. I want to know. And yeah,
I,
you're in charge of it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Not even in an uptight way. It's almost sweet in a way, right? And what a gift to give to the
Yeah, no,
world.
it's good. It's not a
Yeah, yeah,
there's a school of thought. I call it Freudian. It's probably unfair to Freud, but
yeah,
that's just like you dig through this stuff and you say, "Oh, that's where it came from," and shove it aside as, well, it's unimportant. That's how we versus like, no, it was a tragedy that led to something beautiful. Like some of the longest lasting art that we're going to produce as a culture, Lord of the Rings is that. And it
yeah.
it came from the what is very tragic. It's sad,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah,
So
I mean, just
it's
awful, just horrific.
yeah,
Um, Well, so who should pick up the slack, right, with these orphans? I mean, you've got a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. The Catholic priest, Father Francis Xavier Morgan, became their guardian, and he would become one of the most decisive and important figures of Tolkien's youth. Eventually, it would be strained by Tolkien's young love, and we'll dedicate some time to that. I want to read a little bit from this URL that I have. This is the churchlifejournal.nd.edu. This is from Notre Dame. That's a good school, University of Notre Dame. I'm only going to read a little bit of this because we're going to focus on more of this in the After Dark, but I have to give some nod to it here on the main part. Writing in 1953, while The Lord of the Rings was being prepared for publication, and I want you to note that he didn't, I don't think he was, I think he was 60 years old ish when The Lord of the Rings, maybe a little
That'd be about
younger.
92 to 50, 92 to the 50s is,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
60, 61
yeah,
when The Lord of the Rings was published. So never give up, never doom,
yeah.
folks. Yeah. The Lord, here's what he wrote. The Lord of the Rings is, of course, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, capital C Catholic. Unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision. That is why I have not put in or have cut out practically all references to anything like religion, to cults or practices in the imaginary world. For the religious element is absorbed into the story and the symbolism. However, that is very clumsily put and sounds more self important than I feel. For as a matter of fact, I have consciously planned very little and should chiefly be grateful for having been brought up since I was 8 in a faith that has nourished me and taught me all the little that I know. We'll talk a little more about this on the After Dark for patrons. I just wanted to note that. I believe he said, I remember reading that he said that he almost didn't write these things. And again, that can be a little pat or clever or evasive. But I think he felt like he was really drawing up some ancient archetypal, maybe more Jungian than Freudian stuff, like almost like this like race memory of Northern Europe, this kind of like ancient. He felt like he was stuff was channeling through him through his deep understanding of multiple languages. I mean, he understood Middle English, Old English, Gothic, German, Finnish, Icelandic. He read all their myths in the original. I mean, he was just a genius for these languages. So Middle Earth emerges not out of one man's ego, but out of a scholar's depth of understanding and appreciation for language and myth.
You could call it the collective unconscious, right? If you
Right.
like, that's where it came up with it, or it
Yeah.
came up to him, and he was able to form it through his expertise. And there's fascinating overlap between the Jungian worldview and Tolkien. I've been kind of interested in that lately. But yeah, I think the fact that he could write and did write a book with underlying Catholic Christian themes that didn't use any existing symbolism is something I don't think people sit with long enough. Like people are like, oh, that's neat, he did that, but if, like sit with what that means for both the
Mm,
importance of myth and what it means. It's very fascinating to
mm.
dwell on.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a time before the internet, well before the internet, and really even before mass media, maybe radio to a degree, but I mean,
Yeah,
just to have that voracious desire to understand words at their very deepest level, that's like a shot of, you know, pure adrenaline in terms of speed running and understanding of the collective unconscious.
yeah.
You're not reading a translated Chaucer, or an updated Chaucer. You're not reading the Cliff Notes. You're not reading the hot new translation of Homer's Iliad. You're like reading it in the Greek
Reading the
original.
thing itself, Beowulf,
Right.
Chaucer,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah,
Right. He could
yeah,
recite Beowulf,
yeah.
right? Like in the original with perfect pronunciation, or I assume near perfect pronunciation at a young age. That's what we're dealing with. Um, so they're at the oratory a lot, and which really became their real home. They would hurry around to serve mass for Father Francis at the side altar, so they were altar boys. Um, And so the church takes them in. Um, and then they get into St. Edward's, and so they would go there together. Ronald made many friends at school, and one boy in particular soon became an inseparable companion. His name was Christopher Wiseman. A year younger than Ronald, he was the son of a Wesleyan minister who lived in Edgbaston. He had fair hair, a broad, good-natured face, and an energetically critical manner. The two boys met in the fifth class in the autumn of 1905. Tolkien achieving first place in the class. He was now showing distinct academic promise, and Wiseman coming second, kind of his Sam to his Frodo, right? This rivalry soon developed into a friendship based on a shared interest in Latin and Greek, a great delight in rugby football. They called it ruggers. They never played soccer at King Edward's. Soccer is the peasant sport, right? Ruggers is the posh sport to this day, which I
Hmm.
always find odd. I
Yeah.
suppose it's because the rich kids can afford the injuries. Is I don't know. I have no idea why.
Yeah,
I would
you
love
figure
to
it'd be
hear.
the other way around, but yeah. Like
I
rugby's
have
more barbaric,
I have no idea
but
why.
yeah.
I really
Huh.
don't know why. I think I don't know. I think rugby requires more. It's more formal. I don't know. I would
Okay.
love to hear if anybody. I know we have listeners. We're charting in England right now. We're on the charts, so the podcast charts in England and in Britain.
Yeah.
I understand Britain is not England, people, but yeah, no, I would love to hear to understand the history of that a little bit. Yeah. So Wiseman was a staunch Methodist. Is there any other kind? But the two boys found that they could argue about religion without bitterness. Okay, so he's starting to make friends at King Edward's, and this is where he forms a group. A group forms, and there are four of them, and this becomes the TCBS, which we'll talk about. He's futzing around with languages. Um, Let me read this. Yeah, as a result of his love of words, he had started to invent his own languages. Most children make up their own words. Some even have rudimentary private languages that they share with each other. My little son, we got a video of it, so we'll have it forever, I hope. But he's at that age where he's learning colors and things, and he calls purple. He goes Gurkle, dude.
Yeah.
Ah,
Uh,
you don't know, boys, fellas, ladies. It's so hard. And then the little 1-year-old who's like built like a tank starts going Gurkle. You just go, oh God, I want more. 8 of them.
yeah.
Yeah, and then in any event, Gurkle. Okay. So they invented a language with his cousins, Mary and Marjorie Incledon. The language was called Animalic. Hell yeah. And it was constructed principally out of animal names. For instance, dog, nightingale, woodpecker, 40 meant you are an ass. The Incledons now lived outside Birmingham at Barnt Green, the neighboring village of Rednall, and Ronald and Hillary usually spent part of their holidays there. Ronald learned Animalic and was amused by it. A little later, Marjorie, the elder sister, lost interest in it. And when she dropped out, Mary and Ronald collaborated to invent a new and more sophisticated language. This was called Nevbosh, or the New Nonsense, and it was soon sufficiently developed for the two cousins to chant limericks in it. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
I'm going to do my best here, okay? I'm going to channel my inner child. Darfis malvelgom copalt hoe, pisco iskil farmino wak, prosi go fis do rochte, do kat im mino bokte, de volt fact sok ma timeful girok. This is what I'm saying. There was an old man who said, how can I possibly carry my cow? For if I were to ask it to get to in my basket, it would make such a terrible row. And of course, they're loving this. Nerds.
Yeah. It sounds cool though. It
Mm-hmm.
was really impressive for what are we, 15, 14, 15 at the
Yeah,
time?
yeah.
Whatever.
He and his
Yeah.
cousins, are futzing around. So Father Francis is helping them. And they eventually move in with a woman named, I think, Mrs. Faulkner, because they're staying somewhere that's not working out. And here's a description of it. This is covered very well in the biopic too. It was a gloomy creeper covered house hung with dingy lace curtains. Ronald and Hillary were given a room on the second floor The other occupants of the house were Mrs. Faulkner's husband, Louis, or Louis, a wine merchant with a taste for his own wares. Yo, not on your own supply.
Yeah.
Their daughter, Helen, Annie the maid, and another lodger, a girl of 19, who lived on the first floor beneath the boys' bedrooms and spent most of her time at her sewing machine. Her name was Edith Bratt. She was remarkably pretty, small and slim, with gray eyes, firm, clear features, and short, dark hair. The boys learnt that she too was an orphan, her mother having died 5 years previously and her father some time before that. In fact, she was illegitimate. Her mother, Frances Bratt, had given birth to Edith on the 21st of January of 1889 in Gloucester, where she had perhaps gone to avoid scandal. And for her home was in Wolverhampton, where her family owned a boot and shoe manufacturing business. Scandalous. Frances was aged 30 at the time of Edith's birth. Afterwards, she returned to the Birmingham district to brave the gossip of the neighbors and to bring up her daughter in the suburb of Handsworth. Frances Bratt never married, and the child's father was not named on the birth certificate. Though Francis preserved his photograph and his identity was known to the Bratt family, but if Edith knew the name of her father, she never passed it on to her own children. He's a bastard and an orphan. Great.
So, do the father's still alive, or he just doesn't want anything
I
to
think he's
do
just
with?
not on the. I think he's just not on the scene.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's the impression I get based on that. Despite that, her childhood had been moderately happy. She was brought up in Handsworth by her mother and her cousin Jenny Grove. The Grove connection was much prized by the Bratts, for it linked them with the renowned Sir George Grove, editor of the Musical Dictionary. Edith herself proved to have a talent for music. She played the piano very well, and with her mother, when her mother died, she was sent to the girls' boarding school that specialized in music. By the time she left school, she was expected to be able to make a career as a piano teacher or just possibly a concert pianist. But her guardian, the family solicitor, the lawyer, did not seem to know what he should do next. He found a room for her at Mrs. Faulkner, supposing that her landlady's fondness for music would provide a sympathetic atmosphere as well as a piano for practicing. But he had no further ideas, nor was there any urgency, for Edith had inherited a small amount of land in various parts of Birmingham, and this produced just enough income to keep her. Good going. Must have been from grandparents or something like that. Um, Nothing more need be done for the moment, and nothing was done. Edith stayed on at Mrs. Faulkner's, but she soon found that while her landlady was delighted to have a lodger who could play and accompany soloists at her soirees, the question of actually practicing the piano was quite different. Now, Edith, dear, Mrs. Faulkner would say, sweeping into the room as soon as the scales and arpeggios began, that's enough for now. Great. And Edith would go back sadly to her room and her sewing machine. Then the Tolkien brothers arrive. Okay. Uh, and they become friends, despite the age gap. 16, 19,
Yeah.
age gap.
Yeah. Ah,
Then the Tolkien
okay.
true love. Then the Tolkien brothers arrived, okay, and he's 16, she's 19. He was old for his age, no shit. No parents, dead. Yeah. Already is learning Greek. And she looked young for hers, and she was neat and small and very pretty. Certainly, she did not share his interest in languages, and she had received only a rather limited education, but her manner was very engaging. They became allies against the old lady, as they called Mrs. Faulkner. Edith would persuade Annie, the maid, to smuggle tidbits of food from the kitchen to the hungry boys on the second floor. And when the old lady was out, the boys would go to Edith's room for secret feasts. A little shocked. I mean, that's a rather liberal setup. You know, you've got a young lady boarder and these young boys. You know, I mean, I guess you're
Yeah.
probably watching them at all times, but I mean, clearly they're getting away from it. Um, they took to visiting tea shops in Birmingham. There was one that had a balcony. They would sit and throw sugar lumps into the hats of passersby. That's awesome. Moving to the next table when the sugar bowl was empty. It's so easy to forget these are kids. These are kids. You remember what you were doing when you were 16, 19? Later, they invented a private whistle call When Ronald heard it in the early morning or at bedtime, he would go to his window and lean out to see Edith waiting at her own window below. So this is turning into a romance. With two people of their personalities and in their position, romance was bound to flourish. Both were orphans in need of affection. I mean, it's a beautiful story, really. And they found that they could give it to each other. During the summer of 1909, they decided that they were in love. Somebody decided. You ever decided to fall in love? It's not how it works. Um, Writing to Edith long afterwards, Ronald recalled my first kiss to you and your first kiss to me, which was almost accidental, and our good nights when sometimes you were in your little white nightgown, and our absurd long window talks, and how we watched the sun come up over the town through the mist, and Big Ben toll hour after hour, and the moths almost used to frighten you away, and your whistle call, and our cycle rides, and the fire talks, and the three great kisses. And so at this point, he's supposed to be working for an Oxford scholarship. That's the only way he's going to get to go, is on scholarship. Um, but he's getting distracted. Also at school, he gets drawn into the debating society. Um, so let's see here. In a speech there on the motion, probably of his own devising, that this house deplores the occurrence of the Norman conquest, he attacked the influx of polysyllabic barbarities which ousted the more honest, if humbler, native words. Well, in a debate on the authorship of Shakespeare's plays, which we've done on the show, he poured a sudden flood of unqualified abuse upon Shakespeare, upon his filthy birthplace, his squalid surroundings, and his sordid character. He also achieved much success on the rugby field. He was thin, almost scrawny, but he had already learned to compensate for lack of weight by playing with ferocity. Now he made an extra effort, which was rewarded when he got into the school team. Once there, he played as he had never played before. Reflecting on this years later, he ascribed it directly to the impulse of chivalry. Having the romantic upbringing, I made a boy and girl affair serious and made it the source of effort. So he's taking this relationship with Edith very seriously. Then, one day, toward the end of the autumn term of 1909, of course, we know it's coming in the next few years, but not there yet. The war to end all wars, of course. He arranged secretly with Edith that they should go for a bicycle ride into the countryside. We thought we had managed things very cleverly, he wrote. Edith had ridden off on her bicycle nominally to visit her cousin Jenny Grove. After an interval, I rode off to the school sports ground, but we reassembled and made for the Lickies. They spent the afternoon on the hills and then went into Rednall village in search of tea, which they were given at a house where Ronald had stayed some months previously while working on his scholarship, for his scholarship. Afterwards, they rode home, arriving separately, so as not to arouse suspicion, but they had told Mrs. Church that, but they had reckoned without gossip. The woman who had given them tea will be the downfall of us all, told Mrs. Church, the caretaker at this the oratory house, that Master Ronald had been to call and had brought an unknown girl with him. Mrs. Church happened to mention it to the cook at the oratory itself, and the cook, who always liked telling tales, told Father Francis, who had been like a father to him, to Ronald, and his feelings can be imagined when he learnt that the ward on whom he had lavished so much affection, care, and money was not concentrating his abilities on vital schoolwork, but was conducting a clandestine love affair with a girl 3 years his senior who was living in the same house. I'm trying to give you some of the feeling, right? So you're vibing, right? Francis summoned Ronald to the oratory, told him that he was deeply shaken, and demanded that the affair should stop. Then he made arrangements for Ronald and Hillary to move to new lodgings so as to get Ronald away from the girl. And then it goes on saying it's strange that Ronald wouldn't just disobey, but this guy is like a father to him. And and this is all going on when he has to go up to Oxford to take the exam. So it's no wonder he fails it. He doesn't
Right. He
get a
fails the
scholarship.
first one. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So he could try again the following year. Here's what he would write. Um, Depressed and as much in dark as ever. He wrote this on New Year's Day of 1910. God help me, feel weak and weary. It was the first time that he had kept a diary, or at least that this is the first of the diaries preserved. Now, as later in life, he used it chiefly as a record of sorrow and distress. It's important to, he suffered, of course. We all do, but and when later in the year his gloom dissipated, he ceased to keep up the diary entries. It's funny, he only writes in his diary when he's miserable. They say that the closest thing we'll ever have to an autobiography of Tolkien is the letters.
Really?
He never wrote an autobiography. Okay, a little more. Um, he was faced with a dilemma, for though he and Hilary had moved to new lodgings, they were not far from Mrs. Faulkner's house, where Edith was still living. Father Francis had demanded that the love affair be broken off, yet he had not specifically forbidden Ronald to see Edith. We're getting a little lawyerly with this, right?
Yeah.
It's not an affair; it's we're seeing each other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they would meet clandestinely. They spent an afternoon together, taking a train into the countryside, discussing their plans. They visited a jeweler's shop. Edith bought Ronald a pen for his 18th birthday, and he purchased a 10 and 6 penny wristwatch for her 21st, which they celebrated in a tea shop the next day. I feel like you got to understand that these tea shops are centers for spycraft.
it's, it's funny how scandalous it is too. You're taking tea with a young lady.
Well,
Yeah.
you're not. Are you engaged? Are you
Hmm.
wed? Right.
Yeah.
We know where this leads to. This leads to another Edith Brat. Right. And she's also like, these are orphans, and she's
Right.
already illegitimate. And
Illegitimate. Yeah.
yeah, it's like the whole society is just going, we don't want to be responsible for this, and they're gonna. Where do you think
No.
spill the tea comes from? Right. Um, Edith had now decided to accept an invitation to go and live in Cheltenham with an elderly solicitor and his wife who had befriended her. When she told this to Ronald, he wrote, "Thank God," in his diary, for it was the best solution. But once again, because she'll leave, right? They had been seen together. This time, Father Francis made his attitude quite clear. Ronald must not meet or even write to Edith. He could only see her once more to say goodbye on the day she left for Cheltenham. After that, they must not communicate again until he was 21, when his guardian would no longer be responsible for him. Right. I mean, it would be an enormous scandal if the ward of a Catholic priest had a child out of wedlock with this older orphan girl. I mean, it would
Right. Right.
be a
So
massive scandal. I am responsible for you,
he's kind
right?
of heading off. Yeah. He knows where
Yeah.
these kind of hormones lead and all that. No, it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, yeah. This is before birth control. This is before. Yeah, I mean, so I'm sort of on the side of the priest to a degree here. I mean, I mean, there's a good reason for it. It isn't just some sort of dogmatic doctrinal thing. I mean, there's good practical reasons we got to keep these two away
Yeah.
from each
Yeah.
other. Yeah. Yeah. This meant a wait of 3 years. Ronald wrote in his diary, 3 years is awful. A more rebellious young man might have refused to obey. Even Ronald, loyal to Father Francis, found it hard to follow his guardian's wishes. On the 16th of February, he wrote, "Last night prayed would see E by accident. Prayer answered. Saw her at 12:55 at Prince of Wales. Told her I could not write and arranged to see her off on Thursday fortnight. Happier, but so much long to see her just once to cheer her up. Cannot think of anything else. Then on the 21st of February, I saw a dejected little figure sloshing along in a mac and tweed hat, and could not resist crossing and saying a word of love and cheerfulness. This cheered me up a little for a while. Prayed and thought hard. I met her coming from the cathedral to pray for me on another day. Though these meetings were accidental, there was the worst possible consequences. On the 26th of February, Ronald had a dreadful letter from Father Francis saying I had been seen with the girl again, calling it evil and foolish, threatening to cut short my university career if I did not stop. Means I cannot see E. Not right at all. God help me. Saw E at midday, but would not be with her. I owe all to Father Francis, and so must obey. When Edith learnt what had happened, she wrote to Ronald, "Our hardest time of all has come." On Wednesday, the 2nd of March, Edith set out from Duchess Road to go to her new home in Cheltenham. In spite of his guardian's ban, Ronald prayed that he might catch a final glimpse of her. When the time for her departure came, he marched the streets, at first in vain, But then at Francis Road corner, she passed me on bike on way to station. I shall not see her again, perhaps for 3 years. All right. So
Damn.
we have a love. It's heavy, right? You ever
Yeah.
had yeah. You remember being in love when you were a kid? Like a
Yeah.
young man? Puppy love?
Yeah. Puppy love. Nothing. Yeah. If anybody got in the way of it, it was myself. Uh, fumbling the
Sure.
bag or whatever. But no, it's interesting that he obeyed. Ultimately, he's like, okay, I gotta. This just that's a tough situation to be torn in. You're grateful to the priest for looking after you and whatever fatherly affection is transferred over to him, but you also have, the love of your life, and you're kind of just, between the two poles. And what do you do? And I think I know where this heads, so I know it's ultimately happy. But yeah, it's fascinating that he's gonna obey the 3 year moratorium, and yeah, it's quite the
Yep.
dilemma.
Yep. So, yes, it is. So she moves to Cheltenham, and this is where he starts hanging out in the school's library where they have these illicit teas at King Edward's. Uh, in 1911, they formed this little club, including Tolkien, Christopher Wiseman, R.Q. Gilson, son of the headmaster, and three or four others. This little clique formed itself into an unofficial group called the Tea Club. And here's Wiseman's account of its origins, she would tell many years later. It started in the summer term. I'm not going to do an accent. With very great daring. Exams went on for 6 weeks, and if you were not having an exam, you really had nothing to do. So we started having tea in the school library. People used to bring subventions. I remember someone brought a tin of fish, and we didn't care for it, so up it went on a shelf on top of some books and stayed there until it was nosed out a long time later. We used to boil a kettle on a spirit stove, but the great problem was what you were to do with the tea leaves. Well, the tea club often went on after school, and the cleaners would come around with their mops and buckets and brooms, throwing sawdust down and sweeping it all up. So we used to put the tea leaves in their buckets. Those first teas were in the library cubbyhole. Then, as it was the summer term, we went out and had tea at Barrow's store in Corporation Street. In the tea rooms there was a sort of compartment, a table for six between two large settles, quite secluded, and it was known as the railway carriage. This became a favorite place for us, and we changed our title to the Barrovian Society after Barrow's stores. Later, I was editor of the school chronicle, and I had to print a list of people who had gained various distinctions. So, against the people in the list who were members, I put an asterisk, and at the bottom of the page, by the asterisk, it said also member of the TCBS, etc. It was a 7 day wonder what it stood for. So they have their own little like secret society, right? And they're just having tea together and talking shit. So the membership would fluctuate a little. The core group was Tolkien, Wiseman, Robert Quilter Gilson, and a few others, and they almost like a literary society. These are like aspiring intellectual young men who are all set to go off. Although a war interrupts quite a lot of it,
Yeah.
they're all set to go off, to Cambridge or Oxford. So a little bit. Tolkien's contribution to the TCBS, as they came to call it, reflected the wide range of reading he had already encompassed. He delighted his friends with recitations from Beowulf, the Pearl, and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and recounted horrific episodes from the Norse Volsungs, Volsunga's saga. Boy, nailed it. And recounted her. Oh, yeah, I already said that. With a passing jibe at Wagner, whose interpretations of the myth he held in contempt. He
Really?
famously said, they're both about a ring and it kind of ends there. That's what he said. Although, I mean, you can't help but note the prominence of the ring
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
a
It's
theme.
a
It's a
big thing.
theme. Yeah, it's a theme. Um, these erudite performances in no way struck his friends as odd. Indeed, in Wiseman's words, the TCBS accepted it as yet another instance of the fact that the TCBS itself was odd. Perhaps it was, though such coteries were and are not uncommon among well educated adolescents who are going through a stage of enthusiastic intellectual discovery. Later, a fourth member was added to the group. This was Jeffrey Baca Smith, a year younger than Gilson and nearly 3 years junior to Tolkien. He was not a classicist like the others, but came from the modern side of the school. He lived with his brother and their widowed mother in West Bromwich, and possessed what his friends considered to be a Midland wit. Okay. The TCBS, does that mean like the Midwest? I don't know. I don't know what is a Midland wit.
In
You can email
England,
us. Yeah,
yeah.
in England. Yeah. artofdarkpod@gmail.com. Tell us what a Midland wit is. We know what a midwit is, but that's different. Um, the TCBS took him into its ranks partly for this, and partly because he had a qualification all too rare at King Edward's. He was knowledgeable about English literature, especially poetry. Indeed, he himself was a practicing poet of some competence. So they began to wake up with his addition to the significance of poetry, and Tolkien was already getting into it. So let's see here. Tolkien began tentatively to write verse. This is a very important turn. This is sort of the first kind of creative writing that he starts to do is verse, which is not uncommon. He did not write much, and it was not very good, certainly no better than the average juvenile effort of the time. Indeed, there was only one sign of anything even faintly unlikely, and that came in July 1910 when he wrote a descriptive piece about a forest scene entitled Wood Sunshine. It included these lines. Kevin reads poetry on Art of Darkness. Poems. I that Beyonce poem is moving. It's a again, if you write the paper tracing Beyonce to Tolkien to Wagner, I want to read it. It might be a good use of AI, generative AI.
Yeah.
Come sing ye light fairy things, tripping so gay, like visions, like glinting reflections of joy, all fashioned of radiance, careless of grief, o'er the green and brown carpet, not hasten away. Oh, come to me, dance for me, sprites of the wood. Oh, come to me, sing to me once, ere ye fade. Okay, so we're talking about fairies and things, right? So he already has this interest in it. Why? Well, J.M. Barrie may have had a little to do with it. In April of 1910, Tolkien saw Peter Pan at a Birmingham theater and wrote in his diary, "Indescribable, but you'll never forget it as long as I live. Wish E had been with me." Which is unsurprising. You think about Peter Pan and the orphan children
Orphaned.
and
Yeah.
lost children and everything. Yeah, yeah, could be moved. But perhaps of more importance was his enthusiasm for the Catholic mystic poet Francis Thompson. Um, so fine. So he's getting inspired by poetry at this point. But his major concern in 1910 is no longer Edith. She's out of sight, although he is still thinking about,
Carrying carrying the
yeah, when he,
torch.
that's right. Yeah, carrying the torch big time. It's getting into Oxford. He put in as many hours of private study as he could manage. He still had some distractions, rugby, um, which he was playing, and led to injuries. He broke his nose in one match. I mean, you're guaranteed to get injured in rugby. I think you play enough, you're just going to get injured. You hear some horror stories too. People are like ears torn off, or like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, it's legit. Um, so he cut his tongue. His nose never regained its shape, so if his nose looks funny. Um, so he was spending a good deal of time working at languages. On in the Lent term of 1910, it's Lent right now. He delivered to the first class at King Edward's a lecture with the weighty title "The Modern Languages of Europe: Derivations and Capabilities." It took 3 1-hour lessons to read, and even then, the master in charge stopped him before he could reach the capabilities. And he's doing debating society as well. So he goes to Oxford in December, and he's successful. He learns that he had been awarded an open classical exhibition to Exeter College. It's not the most pleasing result. He could have won a valuable scholarship, and this exhibition, which was a slightly inferior award, was worth only £60 a year, but it was no mean achievement. And with the aid of a school leaving bursary from King Edward's and additional help from Father Francis, he could go to Oxford.
Okay, so he's in.
He's in.
All right.
That's a good school. And more than almost anybody we've covered, I love that story because, I mean, as much as anybody, I mean, he's sort of living the dream, right? I mean, that's where he belongs. I mean,
Oh
it's
yeah.
where a guy of like him belongs. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And wait, this
Cool.
is 1910 or
1911. Yeah,
11.
1911.
Okay.
So
Okay.
just in time to just in time to get in to be sent away again, but we'll get to it, won't we?
Well, he's
I'd
got
say we're
3 years. Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Um cool. All right. So, the TCBS, they sort of like they do stay in touch. There's a great deal of correspondence. Um I've already spoken about Edith Bratt, TCBS, and then he gets into Oxford. So let me read about this. Um, just a few paras about it. The majority of undergraduates at Oxford in 1911 were from prosperous upper class families. Many of them were members of the aristocracy. It was for this class of young man that the university primarily catered. Hence the comparatively luxurious lifestyle, with scouts, college servants, waiting on undergraduates in their rooms. But besides the rich and aristocratic, there was quite a different group of students, the poor scholars, who, if not actually poor, did not come from rich families, and who could only come to the university thanks to financial aid from scholarships. The first group did not always make life pleasant for the second, and had Tolkien, as a scholar from the middle class background, found himself at one of the more fashionable colleges, he would probably have been the victim of a good deal of snobbery. By contrast, and fortunately for him, there was no such tradition of social distinction at Exeter College. In hindsight, it's so clear why Americans would embrace and adopt him, right? He has this, there's like a class consciousness that's present, maybe not always foregrounded, not bitter per se. This really comes across in the movies where you see the difference between like the way the hobbits look at the elves. There's this like, well, it
mhm.
doesn't didn't Curtis Yarvin had a whole moment, controversial moment where he talks about the dark elves have to take control and we've got to look after the hobbits. I think we're
I
hobbits, Matt. I don't
yeah.
appreciate that, by the way.
I read
Um,
that. I
yeah.
read that out of curiosity, and what struck me about that was like he kind of. It's like I don't think you've read the books or seen the movies. I see what you're trying to,
Yeah.
but eh,
Yeah, I mean that guy
yeah.
Yarvin's a bigger brain than mine, so I'm not going to pretend to know what he meant by that. But he's pointing out something that is interesting that Yarvin brought that in because it's all there. It's not, you know what I mean? And I think the elves probably emerged from this like encounter with this aristocratic class.
I wonder about that. I wonder. Yeah, but it is interesting. I was reading Lewis is at Oxford in my Lewis research, and they mentioned they have the scouts. Like they have just people. You're a college kid, and you have a little servants bringing you stuff. I thought of Sam and Frodo when I read that. Like that's a kind of an English
Right.
thing. Your loyal gardener servant.
Yeah, you're right,
Uh,
actually, and I forgot about
like
that. Yeah, because
right.
because Bilbo makes a fortune.
Yeah.
Bilbo
It's
is the aristocratic hobbit, right?
mhm.
And he's living forever. Yeah, you're right. It's all mixed up. It's not as
But it's
black and
weird. It's
white.
not a
Mm.
lineage. And with the Yarvin thing, like there's no dark elves in Tolkien lore are kind of orcs. Orcs are
Mm.
fallen elves.
Mm.
It's a whole thing, but it is interesting. And I think you're right. The point like there's not a lot of typical British snobbery in Tolkien. Snobbery towards the masses. I
No, no,
think
it's the opposite. I mean,
the Shire's pleasant, and all you want to do is just have a good meal, a good pipe, and watch the sunset or whatever. You know
right,
what I mean?
but you'll go to
Yeah,
the end of the world to protect it.
yep. And there's a
Yeah,
part of you that longs for adventure, but the other part of you is just I just want bacon and eggs and a nice
yeah,
fire.
yeah.
So
It's the ultimate reluctant hero.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
not a man of letters looking down on the common folk. He's kind of the common folk have it right if you're just
Mm.
hanging out grilling
That's
or
right. Yeah,
whatever. You
you
know what I
just want to
mean?
grill. Yeah,
Yeah.
Bill. But there is this implication too in the work that because of course Bilbo is writing, trying to write his memoirs, but he's not like a literary a literary man. It's just he's got a lot to say.
He's a normal
Um,
guy putting down his adventures.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right, right. But it doesn't. Frodo goes to the Western lands too with the elves at the very end,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
there's this implication that like once you've been out of the Shire, once you've gone through that experience, some people can come back, but some people can't. Like you've seen too much,
And
right?
Frodo literally he got wounded by
Right,
the blade,
right, right.
the
That's
ring
right.
wraith. So, but yeah, so
Yeah.
Sam and Merry and
Hmm.
Pippin stay and thrive.
Hmm.
But yeah, Bilbo and
Yeah,
Frodo get to go
yeah.
west.
And
Yeah.
they're both the Bilbo and Frodo are both the ring bearers.
Yep.
So, and the implication, of course, is that the ring leaves this mark on you that's just, you know, undeniable.
Hmm.
Changes you. Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Very rich. So I just want to read a little more about life at Oxford. We are looking for scouts for Art of Darkness. We're still looking
Hmm.
for a nurse who has a master's in library science and knows how to make cassette tapes and do IVs and research. So we've got two openings now for Art of Darkness interns. We're looking for scouts who can make tea.
Yep.
Yeah, and we're looking for the still looking for the librarian nurse.
And
So Art
I
of Darkness.
believe they're yeah, Batmen is what they're called.
Oh yeah.
Predates the term. I'm not making
Oh,
it. It's a Batman.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Okay, all right. Yet it was as well for Tolkien that among the second year men at his college were a couple of Catholics who sought him out and made sure that he settled in. After that, he made friends quickly, though he had to be careful about money, for he only had a tiny income and it was not easy to live economically in a society designed for the tastes of the rich. His scout brought breakfast to his rooms every morning, and this could be restricted to a frugal meal of toast and coffee, but there was a tradition of entertaining one's friends to breakfast and second breakfast. I added that. And this demanded that something more substantial should be provided at one's own expense. Lunch was a mere commons of bread, cheese, and beer, again brought to his rooms by the scout. Well, dinner taken formally in hall was not an expensive meal, but it was pleasant at dinner to accept an offer of beer or wine from one's friends. And of course, this gesture had to be returned. When the battle or college account was presented for payment each Saturday morning, it could be unpleasantly high. Then there were clothes to be bought and a few pieces of furniture to be found for his rooms, and the college provided only the bare necessities. The cost soon mounted, and although Oxford tradesmen were accustomed to allowing almost unlimited credit, they had to be paid in the end. After a year, Tolkien wrote that he had a good few bills unaccounted for and added, money matters are not very cheerful. All right. So he throws himself into the university life. He's playing rugby, um, uh, and he did not become a leading figure. He did not row that sport above all, was the preserve of the public school men, or by which public there means private school men, the true prep school kids. Um, but he joined the college essay club and the dialectical society, took part in the Stapleton, the college debating society, and he started his own club. All right, so yeah, he's he takes up the habit of the pipe. At Oxford, the company had to be male. There were a number of women students attending lectures, but they lived in ladies' colleges, grim enclaves on the outskirts of the city, and they had to be severely chaperoned whenever they approached a young man. So this is where that you get the sense of that camaraderie and that fellowship that comes across in the Lord of the Rings, and the women have a part to play in the story of the ring, but it is fundamentally this
You're just
masculine fellowship
having fun
of
with your buddies. Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, defeating pure evil with your buddies and this old wizard. Um, I was going to say earlier, I mean, the climax of the story, talking about class and everything, is when the king and everyone they kneel to the hobbits. They
Yeah.
kneel to these plain shire folk.
Where we couldn't have done it without you.
Yeah,
Recognition of that. Yeah.
you kneel to no one. It's this egalitarian, very liberal, in the classical sense. Idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not once again,
yeah.
not snobby. That's a good
No,
insight. Yeah. He's not
yeah, no. I
an
mean,
Oxford.
yeah. I mean, and the book is called The Return of the King. I mean, and it's sort of
Yeah.
like Frodo returns to the Shire. Like, what king are we talking about here? You know, there's multiple sort of implications. He
Yeah.
didn't like that title for the third book because he said it sort of gives it away. I mean, he wanted, when he finally gets
Yeah.
around to publishing Lord of the Rings, he wanted it all to be one volume, and they're like, nobody is going to buy this.
Yeah. Or in some like the literally it can only be so big to
Yeah,
produce
right. Yeah,
in mass.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So they start their own slang. I mean, they have their own slang there, right? Converted breakfast to brecker, lecture to lecker, the union to the ugger, and a sing song and a practical joke to a sigger sogger and a progger jogger. Okay, fine. All right. Here is his account of a not untypical evening's entertainment. At 10 to 9, we heard a distant roar of voices, and we knew that there was something on foot. So we dashed out of college and were in the thick of the fun for 2 hours. We ragged the town and the police and the proctors all together for about an hour. Jeffrey and I captured a bus and drove it up to Corn Market, making various unearthly noises, followed by a mad crowd of mingled varsity and townies. It was chock full of undergrads before it reached the Carfax. There, I addressed a few stirring words to a huge mob before descending and removing to the Maggers Memager, or the Martyrs Memorial, where I addressed the crowd again. There were no disciplinary consequences of all this. So yeah, they're saying this book says that this behavior was more typically reserved for the posh boys. Tolkien was too sociable to be left out of anything lively. And so he's reading the classics. He gets interested in philology, and he would go back to Birmingham for Christmas. He would hang out with the TCBS people. Further, we're getting into 1912. He's at Oxford. There's a lot about this. He's learning Finnish. And of course, he has not forgotten that what does every young man never forget about? It's his lady love. Okay. So let's see here. He's almost 21. Not only was Ronald due to celebrate his own 21st a few days after, but he also intended to reunite himself with Edith Bratt, for whom he had waited for nearly 3 years, and who he was quite certain had waited for him. As the clock struck midnight and marked the beginning of the 3rd of January 1913, his coming of age, he sat up in bed and wrote a letter to her, renewing his declaration of love and asking her, how long will it be before we can be joined together before God and the world? Basically, in asking her to marry him.
yeah.
But when Edith wrote in reply, it was to say that she was engaged to be married to George Field, brother of her school friend Molly.
No.
Dun dun dun! Oh
And
no! Yep.
yeah. So
Yeah.
what are we? The cliffhanger. Like, okay. And so
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we know how it ends, but boy, that is pretty gnarly.
you wait in
Not
three
good.
years. And they're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you're what? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's see what he does. Never give up, boys.
But at least she's just engaged. Could
Mm-hmm.
be, oh, I've been married for
Right.
a year. Yeah.
Right. That would be, yeah, I'm married. I have a little boy.
Yeah. Oh,
His name is John after
yeah.
you,
Oh,
just
yeah.
like, oh my God. Ah. Yeah. There's another universe where the Lord of the Rings doesn't exist. And poor Tolkien it didn't make it. All right. So he could have decided to forget all about her. His friends did not know of her existence, and his aunts and uncles and cousins had never been told about her. Only Father Francis knew, and he made a decision. He must go to Cheltenham and ask her to marry him. In truth, he knew she would say yes. She had hinted as much in her letter, explaining that she had only become engaged to George because he had been kind to her and she felt on the shelf. And there was no other young man that she knew, and she had given up, believing that Ronald would want to see her again after the 3 years had passed. I began to doubt you, Ronald, she told him in the letter, and to think you would cease to care for me. And now that he had written to renew his vow of love, she indicated that everything had changed. So maybe not as bad as I made
All
it out to
right.
be, but it's very dramatic anyway,
Still,
right?
yeah. And he's got
Still,
to actually go show it. He's got to,
yeah, that's right. That's
yeah.
right. Get on the train. So he takes the train to Cheltenham in January They walked out into the country and sat under a railway viaduct where they talked. By the end of the day, Edith had declared that she would give up George Field and marry Ronald Tolkien.
I mean, that
You, mhm.
go ahead, no go.
Quick, you versus the philologist she tells you not to worry about.
Uh, yeah.
What were you going to say?
That is that is very romantic. For a guy who gets grief for not writing women well or anything, that is the hell of a story.
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she says now she has to write to George, and he's upset, and the family's insulted and angry. But eventually it went away,
Yeah.
and they all became friends once more. Can happen. It's all right. You know, Edith and Ronald did not announce their engagement. They were a little nervous and waited until his prospects were a little more certain. And of course, he returns to Oxford. And one of the first things he does is to write Father Francis. And he was nervous about that. But Father Francis wrote back saying, you know, uh, calm and resigned, if far from enthusiastic.
I,
Which, these are two orphans we're dealing with, right? And it's like, what are you, okay, so you're studying at Oxford on a scholarship. You don't have any money.
yeah.
What do you, yeah.
But at a certain point, you got to realize he's going to make this happen either
Hmm.
way. You know?
Right. So he turns his attention um, to school. There's some business here about what program he would sort of stick with. Um, I think eventually his scholarship, if based on the biopic I watched, goes away, but then he kind of works his way into the Department of Philology or Language. Like he proves himself. Uh,
Okay.
I mean, he gets into the. I think the fellow who's like the head of that department is like there are 50 students already here who already understand X, Y, and Z, and then he let him come into a class, and then Tolkien like mocked everybody.
Okay.
So that's the kind of person he is. She ends up moving to Warwick, uh, which is in the south. Um, and he does kind of pressure her over Catholicism. Like if we're going to get married,
Oh,
like
she's not Catholic, huh?
no, no,
Right.
right.
Right. Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So here we go. Edith was instructed in the Catholic faith by Father Murphy. Good, good Irish Catholic name. The parish priest at Warwick, who did the job no more than adequately. Ronald was later to blame much on the poor teaching given her at this time, but he himself did not help her. He found it difficult to communicate to her the deep and passionate nature of his own faith, entwined as it was with the memory of his dead father. In 1914, she was received into the Roman Catholic Church. This was the first anniversary of their reunion, and they were officially betrothed in church by Father Murphy. Edith made her first confession and first communion, which she found to be a great and wonderful happiness. And at first, she continued in this state of mind, attending Mass regularly and often making her communion. But the Catholic Church at Warwick was a poor affair compared to the splendors of Cheltenham. And although Edith helped with a church club for working girls, she made few friends in the congregation. She also began to dislike making her confession. It was all too easy, therefore, when she was worried about her health, which was often to postpone going to Mass. She reported to Ronald that getting up to go to church early in the morning and fasting until she had made her communion did not agree with her. I want to go, she told him, and wish I could go often, but it is quite impossible. And at this point, she's leading a bit of a dreary life. Meanwhile, he's in Oxford, becoming distinctly stylish. He bought furniture and Japanese prints for his rooms. He ordered 2 tailor-made suits, which he found looked very well on him. He started another club called the Checkers, and it met on Saturday nights to have dinner in his or his friends' rooms. He was elected president of the College Debating Society, which was a big deal at Exeter, after a faction fight which gave him his first taste of college politics, a taste that he liked very much. You have to be an academic. I could
Yeah.
never do it. I would always just snap. I would lose my
Yeah.
mind. I hate it. Ugh, you have to. You have to be like either extraordinarily talented so that they just leave you the fuck alone, or you have to be willing to play that game.
Yeah.
Horrible. He punted, he played tennis, and now and then he did some work. I think punting there means boating.
Yeah, I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever been over there? Have you ever been to Oxford?
No, no, I've
Beautiful.
never been to England. No.
You got to go. Got to go sometime.
But,
Hey, we'll do an Art of Darkness live in England. We will fly business class.
oh,
I
I'm down.
you can stuff me in the luggage. Matt'll fly coach, stuff me in the luggage. I'll be fine. I'm a public school kid, or as you would say, a private school kid.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's beautiful. I've been to Tolkien's grave.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Yeah, very
yeah,
moving. Very moving. We'll arrive at
yeah.
that point. Yeah.
I had a 2 hour layover at Heathrow, but I don't
Oh,
count
okay.
that. All
Nah,
right.
no, that
So,
that counts.
yeah.
That counts. The spirit of modern day England, contemporary England, is captured at Heathrow
In
Airport.
Heathrow. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah. So he's living the life. Let's see here.
It's
Just wanna.
interesting. Embracing being
Mhm.
fancy.
Yeah, I think it's gonna rub
Yeah.
off on you.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna rub off on you. I think it'd be
Yeah.
hard to go to Oxford and like, then not so much as now. There's no glamour in dressing like a roadie for Bob Dylan and pretend LARPing as the working class. That this is would become a very tweedy man. Do you know? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah. You're
step
gonna
up
be
into the thing. Yeah.
right. Why would you? Yeah. I don't get the impression he's like a poser. He can back it up.
That's your lifestyle now. Yeah.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah. I mean, I think Radiohead are from Oxford or like were
Yeah.
based in Oxford. And there's this thing going around showing that the cover of OK Computer is based on an interstate exchange that they saw somewhere in maybe like Connecticut on tour, and it deeply unnerved Tom York. Just this basic landscape of America. And yeah, I could see the culture shock of the American interstate system if you're used to Oxford, fucking England, which
You're like,
is, yeah, some of the most beautiful architecture in the world built on a human scale. And then you come to America and it's just this monstrous,
what?
military installation that everyone uses. The world's largest military installation is the interstate system.
Eh?
So
Yeah.
yeah, hey, well,
Huh.
if you turn it into one of the greatest guitar rock albums of all time, it's fine. It's fine to be a little nervous about the highway. All right, so he takes a long vacation. He goes to Nottinghamshire, and he's at a farm. He writes a poem. I want to read another of one of his poems, and this is "The Voyage of Arundel, the Evening Star," and it begins as follows: Arundel sprang up from the ocean's cup in the gloom of the mid-world's rim. From the door of night, as a ray of light leapt over the twilight brim, and launching his bark like a silver spark from the golden fading sand, down the sunlit breath of day's fiery death, he sped from Westerland. So we're already now. The germ of Middle Earth is being born. What happens next, Matt?
It's the big
What do you,
one, right?
it's the big one.
It's yeah. Uh,
War. War. He's got some more poetry here. Uh and yeah, and he's working on his language. I want to read another poem. So let's see here. West of the moon, east of the sun, there stands a lonely hill. Its feet are in the pale green sea, its towers are white and still. Beyond Tamfkatil in Valinor, no stars come there but one alone that hunted with the moon, for there the two trees naked grow, that bear night's silver bloom, that bear the globed fruit of noon in Valinor. There are the shores of Faerie, with their moonlit pebbled strand, whose foam is silver music on the opalescent floor. Beyond the great sea shadows on the margent of the sand that stretches on forever from the golden feet of Kor. Beyond Tanfkatil in Valinor. O west of the moon, east of the sun lies the haven of the star, the white town of the wanderer, and the rocks of Eglamour, where Wingalot is harbored while, excuse me, there Wingalot is harbored while Arundel looks afar on the magic and the wonder tween here and Eglamour, out beyond Tanfkatil in Valinor afar. So that's where he's at, and he achieves first class honors, and which guarantees him at Oxford, which basically says you can be an academic. First class honors from
Oh, wow.
Oxford. Yeah.
So he's graduate. He's done with his
Um,
undergraduate stuff. He gets it in before
yes.
the war.
Yeah, while Tolkien's mind was occupied with the seeds of his mythology, he was preparing himself for schools, his final examination in English language and literature. The examination began in the second week of June 1915, and Tolkien was triumphant, achieving first class honors. He could, in consequence, be reasonably certain of getting an academic job when the war was over. But in the meantime, he had to take up his commission as a second lieutenant. I'm going to say lieutenant. We're in England, right? In the Lancashire Fusiliers. He was posted not as he had hoped to the 19th Battalion, in which G.B. Smith was serving, but to the 13th. So now he's on. He grows a mustache. He buys a motor bicycle, which he shares with a fellow officer, and he becomes a military guy. He's a war guy now, because he has to be. Um, he marries Edith at St. Mary Immaculate Catholic Church at Warwick on the 22nd of March. And in 1941, he would write a letter expressing admiration for his wife's willingness to marry a man with no job, little money, and no prospects except the likelihood of being killed in the Great War. And then he is in France serving during the Somme campaign.
Mhm.
Once again, the biopic does a good job of this. There are some scenes in there where he's like lying in a crater of blood, practically, which
Yeah,
is very. It's some of the more intense representation of World War One.
it's
And you
gnarly.
gnarly,
I'm there with the my Lewis book right now, and it's man, it's yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's really sweet. They get married in there. They would took a train to stay in Somerset, and they would both doodle their names, right? Edith Mary Tolkien, Edith Tolkien, Mrs. Tolkien, very
Yeah.
sweet. So they make it, but then he has to go to this war, and he very, very easily could have died. God had
It's just
a,
so
I do
random. It's
believe it's just
yeah,
you
yeah.
go over the top. What did 300,000 people die at the Somme? How many people died at the Somme?
It's a crazy number. It's more than you'd think. I remember here, like,
Yeah,
and I think you and Brad have touched on it before, but it's just crazy how many people were at that battle. It's like,
one
yeah,
1 million casualties,
yeah, way more. Like that's crazy.
and that's
And
killed, wounded, or captured.
yeah, that's that's nuts. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we do live in a post-apocalyptic Western world. I mean, this was an
It's
apocalypse. I mean, and these were the best, right? These
yeah.
were the able-bodied young men, like an entire
Mhm.
generation. And I'll cut to the chase, really, and say the only reason um, uh, that he survived was that he ended up getting trench fever.
Mhm.
So let me read of this. Most were Lancashire men. Officers could not make friends among them, for the system did not permit it. But each officer had a Batman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Tolkien was an officer, right? I mean, he's coming out of Oxford, right? A servant who was detailed to look after his kit and care for him, much in the manner of an Oxford scout. Through this, Tolkien got to know several of the men very well. Discussing one of the principal characters of The Lord of the Rings, he wrote many years later, "My Sam Gamgee is indeed a reflection of the English soldier, of the privates and batmen I knew in the 1914 war, and recognized as so far superior to myself." Yeah. What a beautiful thing. And they render it so well in the film. Just this idea that Sam is carrying the ring with Frodo because he loves Frodo in a brotherly way. Very moving. We need more of that energy in the world and less of the doom scrolling cynicism that
Yeah.
seems to dominate.
Oh yeah. In the yeah, helps you out in the face of like great peril. It's
Keeps your
yeah.
spirit up.
Yep.
Doesn't let you fall into the dark.
Yep. And it's interesting, the artists that do come out of this actually create some very regenerative literature. Lewis comes out of the First World War. Robert Graves, I believe, was at the Somme. Ernst Junger was at the Somme on the other side. I mean, it
Mhm.
was apocalyptic. It could be devastating, but there's a lot of people who actually made it out who would go on to create something regenerative, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, the Austrian painter was at
He
the
was
Somme.
there and he would be an exception.
Well, I
But
mean,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, but it's
yeah,
crazy how many
sure.
people were at that battle.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for what?
Yeah.
I mean, Tolkien believed that even though their side was not good per se, they were fighting a greater evil. That's what he believed. I think you would have to, on some level. We don't have to get into the nuances of World War One, but I've still yet to receive a good answer as per why that war was fought. Um, I don't have a
There's
good
no
explanation.
satisfying us. It's
There's no
dominant.
satisfying
It's
answer.
geopolitical dominoes. There's no
Yeah,
moral reason. It's just yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
What Tolkien now experienced had already been endured by thousands of other soldiers. The long march at night time from the billets down to the trenches, the stumble of a mile or more through the communication alleys that led to the front line itself, and the hours of confusion and exasperation until the handover from the previous company had been completed. He was a signaler, which makes perfect sense, doesn't it? I mean, you talk about language, right? For signalers such as Tolkien, there was bitter disillusionment, as instead of the neat, ordered conditions in which they had been trained, they found a tangled confusion of wires, field telephones out of order and covered with mud, and worst of all, a prohibition on the use of wires for all but the least important messages. The Germans had tapped telephone lines and intercepted crucial orders preceding attacks. Even Morse code buzzers were prohibited, and instead the signalers had to rely on lights, flags, and at the last resort, runners or even carrier pigeons. Worst of all were the dead men, for corpses lay in every corner, horribly torn by the shells. Those that still had faces stared with dreadful eyes. Beyond the trenches, no man's land was littered with bloated and decaying bodies. All around was desolation. Grass and corn had vanished into a sea of mud. Trees, stripped of leaf and branch, stood as mere mutilated and blackened trunks. Tolkien never forgot what he called the animal horrors of trench warfare. All right. Whew. You can see now, I think, we're how the Lord of the Rings, if you're familiar with it, where it's built from, right?
Yeah. Or at least
Um,
the imagery, yeah, comes
absolutely.
from yeah, desolate landscapes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So let me just get back to my notes here.
All
Where
right.
is it? Yeah, let me grab from the letters. It's very early in the book of the letters. It's
I'm gonna stand
fascinating.
up for a sec.
Yeah, do it. I hope everybody's having a good time. While Matt stands up, I'm just going to do a little, I guess, bit of housekeeping here and remind people we have a book club. The book club is for patrons. You can sign up on Patreon or Substack. We share a link. You can join us. It's recorded. So if you don't want to hang out with us, you can just listen to the recording. It's extra stuff for you. We have some fun stuff coming on Book Club. The link is at the website, artofdarkpod.com. We already did Scene Bucks. That was a good time with Cairo Smith and the show's lawyer, Dan Baltic. Next, we're doing the new manifesto with Matt's friend Sam Ernst on March 28th, which is pretty soon. Then we're going to read The Great Divorce from C.S. Lewis, later in April. Then in June, we're having Brad Kelly come back. Brad's going to be reading, or Brad's going to be talking about his new novel, The Earth and Dark, which I cannot wait to dig into. Join us for that. That is going to be a very special episode. And of course, Brad is doing a core episode this summer. We're going to have Jack from the Book Club from Hell come on. He's going to do J.G. Ballard. Brad's going to do, is it, why can't I remember the episode that Brad's going to be doing?
Max Ernst.
Max Ernst. That's why I'm getting
Yeah.
the Ernsts. I'm overwhelmed by Ernsts. So we've got Sam Ernst and then Max Ernst. Brad's going to be doing. That's going to be great. And then Abby is going to come back and do Michelangelo. So we get a little break on the summer. Although Matt is going to hit us with a very special paywall Vidal episode in the
Yeah.
summer as well. So we got a lot of good stuff coming up. And then we are going to read The Hobbit, High Rise, and assuming Dan Baltic can pull himself away from the Zoomettes for long enough and to finish Nutcracker 2, we will read Nutcracker 2 in December. If that's delayed or not out, we will possibly we'll read something else. I know Cairo has another novel coming out. We talked about that. So um, good times. All right, join us. Book club's fun. All right, so let me read a little bit now from the letters. All right. Well, first, I actually got to read. I gotta get back into the bio just to give you context for what's going on here. Yes, here we go. 15th of July, 1916. My dear John Ronald, I saw in the paper this morning that Rob, one of his friends from the TCBS, has been killed. I am safe, but what does that matter? Do please stick to me, you and Christopher. I am very tired and most frightfully depressed at this worst of news. Now one realizes in despair what the TCBS really was. Oh, my dear John Ronald, whatever are we going to do? Yours ever, GBS. Rob Gilson had died at La Boiselle, leading his men into action on the first day of the battle on the 1st of July. Tolkien wrote to Smith, I do not feel a member of a complete body now. I honestly feel that the TCBS has ended. But Smith replied, the TCBS is not finished and never will be. On Saturday, the 19th of August, it happens to be my birthday and my son's birthday, Tolkien and G.B. Smith met again at a show. They talked and met again on the following days, on the last of which they had a meal together at Beauzencourt, coming under fire as they ate, but surviving uninjured. Then Tolkien returned to the trenches. Although there was no longer the same intensity of fighting as in the first days of the Battle of the Somme, British losses continued to be severe and many of Tolkien's battalion were killed. He himself remained entirely uninjured, but the longer he stayed in the trenches, the greater were his chances of being among the casualties. No shit. That's talk about like an unnecessary sentence.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think we got it. God, can you imagine trench warfare? I
Mm.
I just, it's so inhuman. It's horrific.
Wow.
Horrific.
Wow.
Yeah. As to leave, it was ever imminent, but never granted. His rescuer was pyrexia of unknown origin, as the medical officers called it. To the soldiers, it was simply trench fever. Carried by lice, it caused a high temperature and other fever symptoms, and already thousands of men had reported sick with it. On Friday, the 27th of October, it struck Tolkien. He was billeted at Beauval at the time, 12 miles behind the lines. When he was taken ill, they transported him to hospital a short distance away. A day later, he was on a sick train bound for the coast, and by the Sunday night, a bed had been found for him in hospital at La Touquet, where he remained for a week. But the fever did not die down, and on the 8th of November, he was put on board ship for England. Thank God. Upon arrival, he was taken by train to hospital in Birmingham. So, in a matter of days, he found himself transported from the horror of the trenches to white sheets and a view of the city he knew so well. He was reunited with Edith, and by the third week in December, he was well enough to leave hospital and go to Great Haywood to spend Christmas with her. There, he received a letter from Christopher Wiseman, who was serving in the Navy. My dear J.R.R, I have just received news from home that GBS, who has succumbed to injuries received from shells bursting on December 3rd. I can't say very much about it now. I humbly pray Almighty God I may be accounted worthy of him. So, and this is what the last letter that this GBS fellow, who's part of the club, wrote to Tolkien. My chief consolation is that if I am scuppered tonight, I am off on duty in a few minutes. There will still be left a member of the great TCBS to voice what I dreamed and what we all agreed upon. For the death of one of its members cannot, I am determined, dissolve the TCBS. Death can make us loathsome, and helpless as individuals, but it cannot put an end to the immortal four. A discovery I am going to communicate to Rob before I go off tonight. And do you write it also to Christopher. May God bless you, my dear John Ronald, and may you say the things I have tried to say long after I am not there to say them, if such be my lot. So his buddies start dying in the
Mm.
war.
Yep.
Dead
Yep.
parents, dead buddies.
Yep.
How are you
Yep.
going to metabolize that?
Everything's gone. Well, yeah. Best you just keep going.
I guess.
I mean, what do you I think about Frodo
Yeah,
just going despite it all. You got your obsession. You go into your work.
yeah,
You
yeah,
still have your wife.
sure.
Like,
I mean,
uh,
it's just so to me, it's just so surreal that like getting sick, getting trench fever, the best thing that could have possibly happened to him.
yep,
I
yep.
mean, yeah. Oh boy. All right. Well, and he wrote a long letter to his friend. I'm going to read a bit of it. The one remaining member of the four of TCBS.
Okay, so there's just two now. You and
Yeah,
this other guy.
I can imagine, Ringo writing a letter to Paul, Paul
Yeah.
writing a letter to Ringo. I think those guys are I think they're doing okay. Um, So far, my chief impression is that something has gone crack. I feel just the same to both of you. Nearer, if anything, and very much in need of you. I am hungry and lonely, of course, but I don't feel a member of a little complete body now. I honestly feel that the TCBS has ended, but I am not at all sure that it is not an unreliable feeling that will vanish, like magic perhaps when we come together again. Still, I feel a mere individual at present with intense feelings more than ideas, but very powerless. Um, and he was writing to the fellow who had not yet died when the first one died, and then he would die. So just pretty devastating. And there you go.
Hmm.
All right. Whew, keeping on, keeping on. I feel a little fever coming over me. I don't know what it is. I'm gonna have to go take a schwitz after this. Um, but I'm gonna drink a little bit of water. I hope everybody's having a good time. Um, I'm excited to read this new manifesto book too.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. And I know Sam's doing a dark room as well on Tolkien. It's going to be
Yeah.
his thing, kind of the cultural impact or impact in pop culture of Tolkien. It'll be
What are
fun.
you, just to give me a little, 60-second break, what are you all talking about? Because, of course, Matt has another podcast called There Will Be Books, which is like a kind of a lit bro podcast.
Yeah.
You want to hit people up with what are you all talking about there? And then I'll come back and do more Tolkien. We got another couple of hours to go before the After Dark.
Uh,
So we got a lot to
okay.
talk about.
The actually our newest episode posted on Spotify is about uh, a short story called Enoch Soames by a British writer who went to Oxford named Max Beerbohm, who is sometimes called the Prince of Minor Writers. He's a very funny British P.G. Wodehouse-esque type stuff. Enoch Soames is a little sketch of a character about an author who sells his soul to the devil for a chance to go to the British Library in 100 years and see how his work is appreciated, because the Enoch Soames of the 1890s is unappreciated in his time, and he's convinced selling his soul, or he's convinced he's going to be appreciated in the future. And it's a very funny story, and is actually kind of interesting. Enoch Soames is, unbeknownst to our narrator, kind of a pretentious writer with no talent. But we're not, our narrator isn't quite sure of this because he's young and insecure about as to what constitutes good literature. It's a very funny story, and we kind of go deep into that on the newest There Will Be Books, which is on
All right.
Spotify now.
There you go. Go check out There Will Be Books. If you like Art of Darkness, you're going to like that podcast. And then also go to Method and Madness, Brad, Podcast Party Circuit, and check out the Book Club from Hell as well. It'd be fun to have Jack on. Those are all pods we co-sign here. And if you enjoy these core episodes, get them ad free. Really consider rejoining Patreon if you were there and left, or if you're new and you're listening to 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 episodes, $5 a month is not much to ask. So we really appreciate your support. Um, about the war, in later years, Tolkien would occasionally talk of being, and this is just Wikipedia, talk of being at the front of the horrors of the first German gas attack and the utter exhaustion and ominous quiet after a bombardment, of the whining scream of the shells and the endless marching, always on foot, through a devastated landscape, sometimes carrying the men's equipment as well as his own to encourage them to keep going. Some remarkable relics survive from that time. A trench map he drew himself, pencil written orders to carry bombs to the fighting line. He he went to Mordor, definitely. Mount Doom. Many of his dearest school friends were killed. Rob Gilson. It was killed on the first day of the Somme, and Jeffrey Smith was killed at the Somme when a German artillery shell landed on a first aid post. Tolkien's battalion was almost completely wiped out following his return to England. Uh,
So
according,
getting sick probably did
it
save
saved
his
his
life.
life. It
Like
saved his
almost,
life.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So we have lice to thank for the existence of the Lord of the Rings. I don't know. I think there was a providence for J.R.R. Tolkien. I believe that. Um, so, according to one author, Kitchener's army, in which Tolkien served, at once marked existing social boundaries and counteracted the class system by throwing everyone into a desperate situation together. Tolkien was grateful, writing that it had taught him a deep sympathy and feeling for the Tommy, especially the plain soldier from the agricultural counties. All right. During and after these war years, he began writing the earliest substantial forms of what would become the Book of Lost Tales and much later the Silmarillion, which is the founding mythology of the first age of Middle Earth. So in Middle Earth, there are multiple ages, and I believe the third age is when we drop into the Hobbit. So all of this stuff has happened in the background prior to the third age. Um, so this is where he's starting the deep mythic world of the elder days, predating The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And so let's see here. What do I have? Oh, I got to get back into the bio now. See if I have some words to say about his creation of this stuff. Yeah. May you say the things I have tried to say long after I am not there to say them. G.B. Smith's words were a clear call to Tolkien to begin the great work that he had been meditating for some time, a grand and astonishing project with few parallels in the history of literature. He was going to create an entire mythology. The, the idea had its origins in his taste for inventing languages. He had discovered that to carry out such inventions to any degree of complexity, he must create for the languages a history in which they could develop. Already in the early Arundel poems, he had begun to sketch something of that history. Now he wanted to record it in full. There was another force at work, his desire to express his most profound feelings in poetry, a desire that owed its origins to the inspiration of the TCBS. His first verses had been unremarkable, as immature as the raw idealism of the four young men, but they were the first step toward the great prose poem, for he thought in pro thought in prose excuse me, for though in prose it is a poetic work that he now began to write. And there was a third element playing a part, his desire to create a mythology for England. He had hinted at this during his undergraduate days when he wrote of the Finnish Kalevala. I would that we had more of it left, something of the same sort that belonged to the English. This idea grew until it reached grand proportions. Here is how Tolkien expressed it when recollecting it many years later. Do not laugh, but once upon a time, my crest has long since fallen. I had a mind to make a body of more or less connected legend, ranging from the large and cosmogenic to the level of romantic fairy story. The larger founded on the lesser in contact with the earth, the lesser drawing splendor from the vast backcloths, which I could dedicate simply to England, to my country. I should possess the tone. It should possess the tone and quality that I desired, somewhat cool and clear, be redolent of our air, the clime and soil of the Northwest, meaning Britain and the hither parts of Europe, not Italy or the Aegean, still less the East, and while possessing, if I could achieve it, the fair, elusive beauty that some call Celtic, though it is rarely found in genuine ancient Celtic things. It should be high, purged of the gross, and fit for the more adult mind of a land long steeped in poetry. I would draw some of the great tales in fullness and leave many only placed in the scheme and sketched. The cycles should be linked to a majestic whole and yet leave scope for other minds and hands wielding paint and music and drama. Absurd is the most English sentence of all time.
A little,
Absurd. Full
yeah,
stop. Bosh.
yeah. My life's work and ambition is absurd. Yeah,
Absurd. Yeah.
But you
Knowing
can
too that,
see
yeah.
by aiming that high, you wind up with Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, the whole,
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
the whole
Yeah.
work.
The whole
Um,
work.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So he has a, well, this is where they start having children. So he gets back, he has the fever, he recovers, he gets back with Edith. He had, I'm just going to sort of blast through time. He had four children: John, 1917, Michael, 1920, Christopher, 1924, Priscilla, 1929. For a period of time, he would work on the literal dictionary. He worked on the Oxford English Dictionary after the war. Mm. So uh, he was working on the W's. So he was working on entries that ranged from waggle to warlock. Fun.
Yeah.
Somebody wrote the dictionary.
And they
They,
have a bunch of scholars. They break it up by letter and they go through the etymology and yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. There's something here from the Oxford English Dictionary, J.R.R. Tolkien, and the OED. So a little more here. Amid all the publicity surrounding the release of the film of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Ring, it has occasionally been mentioned that Tolkien was an English professor. What is rather less well known is that in 1919 and 1920, at the very start of his career, Tolkien worked on the staff of the Oxford English Dictionary. He later said of this time that he learned more in those 2 years than in any other equal period of my life. Soon after my own employment on the dictionary began in 1987, this is somebody writing, I decided to investigate just what Tolkien's contribution. Okay, fine. So he was an assistant to Henry Bradley, the second of the four editors of the first edition of the dictionary. He worked on words near the beginning of the letter W. I love this. The first entry in the published dictionary on which he is known to have worked is that for the noun waggle. I mean, how niche, like how, what a mind to just like that's your day, right? We're going to get to the bottom of waggle. He also worked on
Yeah.
the verb, the main sense of which he defined as to move anything held or fixed at one end to and fro with short, quick motions or with a rapid undulation, especially to shake any movable part of the body. Okay, great. Some words, including walnut, walrus, and wampum, seem to have been assigned to Tolkien because of their particularly difficult etymologies. In the case of walrus, he wrote out many different versions of the etymology, six of which remarkably have survived in the archives, thanks to his habit of recycling discarded slips by turning them over and writing on the other side. In fact, walnut, walrus, and wampum were among the few entries singled out by Henry Bradley when the fascicle W to Wash was published in 1921 as containing etymological facts as suggestions not given in other dictionaries. Characteristically, Tolkien continued to puzzle over some of these etymologies long after he had left the OED to take up a post at Leeds University. Okay, fine. So there's more there if you want to read that. The dictionary itself has an entry, or at least their website has a blog post meditating on his contribution. So he goes to Leeds as a reader in English language, and in 1924 he becomes professor of English there. This is a big deal. He was very young, even for that. I mean, to become a full professor of English in 1924, um, he became formidable there. There was a 1925 edition of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight that he produced with a fellow named E.V. Gordon, and so he's having success there. He's growing the mythology. Um, but then an opening arrives uh, at Oxford, and this is what he writes to them. So this is to the electors of the Rawlinson and Bosworth Professorship of Anglo-Saxon University of Oxford. Writes this in the summer of 1925. Gentlemen, I desire to offer myself as a candidate for the Rawlinson and Bosworth Professorship of Anglo-Saxon, a chair which affords such opportunity of expressing and communicating an instructed enthusiasm for Anglo-Saxon studies and for the study of the other old Germanic languages is naturally attractive to me. Nor could I desire anything better than to be reassociated in this way with the Oxford English School. I was a member of that school both as undergraduate and as tutor, and during my 5 years' absence in Leeds, am happy to have remained in touch with it, more especially in the last 2 years as an examiner in the final schools. So he must have judge tests or whatever, right? I entered Exeter College as Stapleton exhibitioner in 1911. It goes on like this. You got to get the flavor, and he's talking about what he's doing at Leeds. The instruction offered has been gradually extended, and now he grew the program at Leeds. Now covers a large part of the field of English and Germanic philology. Courses are given on Old English, heroic verse, the history of English, various Old English and Middle English texts, Old and Middle English philology, introductory Germanic philology, Gothic, Old Icelandic, and medieval Welsh. All these courses I have from time to time given myself. Those that I have given personally in the past year are marked. So he was asked, it's crazy. So that's what he's teaching, right? And it goes on. Philology indeed appears to have lost for these students its connotations of terror, if not of mystery. So he's putting in his best foot forward, right? Let me read the last paragraph. If elected to the Rawlinson and Bosworth chair, I should endeavor to make productive use of the opportunities which it offers for research to advance, to the best of my ability, the growing neighborliness of linguistic and literary studies, which can never be enemies except by misunderstanding or without loss to both, and to continue in a wider and more fertile field the encouragement of philological enthusiasm among the young. I remain, gentlemen, your obedient servant, J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, that point at the end is very important because there was this rivalry between how does he describe it? Neighborliness of linguistics and literary studies. So you'd have the literature department over here, and which I assume was probably considered softer. And then you would have the philological department over here, the language studies over here. And his whole point was like, everybody's got to work together. We can help you understand the deeper meanings of these words. You can do something with them, or we can study what's being done with them in literature. So these departments would often have sort of rivalries. The hot new students come in. Are they going to be in the Department of Philology, or are they going to be in the literature department, right? And there would be rivalry. So that's his point. So he gets the job. He gets it. And he's going to have a chair at Oxford at when did I say he was born?
What year? 92. So he's early 30s?
Yeah. Dude. I mean, he's precocious.
Yeah.
So this is what he has to write to the fellow at Leeds. You into this? Good?
His resignation letter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it goes, I don't know, it gives a good taste of his skills. Dear Dr. Bailey, my election to the Rawlinson and Bosworth professorship at Oxford has just been announced to me, and I have accepted. It takes effect from next October 1st, only with feelings of great regret at this sudden severance in spite of this unexpected turn of fortune for myself. And it goes on, but the final paragraph. So far, I've been so tormented, as many of us annually are in the early summer, with scripts of Leeds, Oxford, and the schools, that I've been quite unable to lend a hand in spite of goodwill in the university's present campaign. This event, I am afraid, will finally preclude me from taking an active hand in this particular service, as the months ahead I can now see are going to be very laborious indeed. So he gives a sort of not a fawning apology, but he's like, I am really sorry. I got a job at Oxford. I got to go. There's nobody at Leeds is going to be like, there's nothing they can do to get him to stay. I mean, it'd be like you're teaching at some state school and Yale makes an offer. I mean, you're moving to New Haven. Cool. All right. So he's on the path now. And he returns to Oxford, and he's the professor of Anglo-Saxon, and he becomes a fellow of Pembroke College. And in 1926, who should he meet but C.S. Lewis? What does the CS stand for in C.S. Lewis? I don't even think I know.
Oh, really?
Off the dome?
Yeah. Clive
What
Staples.
Is it? Clive Staples Lewis. Yeah. Okay.
Everybody called him Jack.
Jack.
He hated Clive and Staples.
Okay, but we like Jack. Okay.
Yeah.
And if I've been stumbling over my words a little bit during this episode, it's because this biography has a very, very tight font. It's a real pleasure to read, but when you're doing a pod, it's sort of
you know what?
Together.
You know what I had to finally give in and get?
Oh no.
Just reading glasses. I don't wear glasses, but in the Young episode and the dark room where I got to read stuff.
Yeah.
Get yourself a pair of $20 and it
Okay.
magnet, Yep.
Okay. I'll think about that. I'll think about that. Yeah, that might improve the aesthetic of the show too for the people who watch on YouTube. All right, so he meets Jack. He meets C.S. Lewis,
Yep.
and I want to read a little bit about that. Um, when Tolkien returned to Oxford in 1925, there was an element missing from his life. It had disappeared with the breaking of the TCBS in the Battle of the Somme. For not since those days had he enjoyed friendship to the same degree of emotional and intellectual commitment. He had continued to see something of the other surviving TCBS member, Christopher Wiseman, but Wiseman was now heavily involved with his duties as the headmaster of a Methodist public school. And when the two men did meet, they now found very little in common. In May of 1926, Tolkien attended a meeting of the English faculty at Merton College. Among the familiar faces, a new arrival stood out, a heavily built man of 27 in baggy clothes who had recently been elected fellow and tutor in English language and literature at Magdalen College. This was Clive Staples Lewis, known to his friend as Jack. At first, the two men circled warily around one another. That was like us. I was circling around you, Matt,
What's
when
this
you
guy's
you
deal?
answered my little. What's this guy?
Yeah.
What's this Coloradan? This guy from Kansas up to? Um, no, there's easy trust between men of letters from the Midwest. You'll find. Tolkien knew that Lewis, though a medievalist, was in the lit camp and thus a potential adversary, while Lewis wrote in his diary that Tolkien was a smooth, pale, fluent little chap, adding no harm in him, only needs a smack or so. Here we go. But soon Lewis came to have a firm affection for this long faced, keen eyed man who liked good talk and laughter and beer, while Tolkien warmed to Lewis's quick mind and the generous spirit that was as huge as Lewis's shapeless flannel trousers. By May of 1927, Tolkien had enrolled Lewis into the Coal Biters, one of his clubs, to join in the reading of Icelandic sagas, and a long and complex friendship had begun. So he had this club where they would get together, and everybody would read from the Icelandic sagas in the original. Of course, Tolkien would mog everybody, but then everybody made their best effort. Like that's their idea of a good time on a Friday night. And I guess if Netflix didn't exist, if the internet didn't exist, this would be what would entertain you.
And this is what they do for fun. They
Yeah,
follow they can make a living off of their passion,
yeah,
you know.
absolutely. Um, so apparently, there's an essay on friendship in Lewis's book, The Four Loves, about friendship, and if you want to understand their friendship. Two companions become friends when they discover a shared insight, how their friendship is not jealous but seeks out the company of others, how such friendships are almost always of necessity between men, how the greatest pleasure of all is for a group of friends to come to an inn after a hard day's walking. Those are the golden sessions, writes Lewis, when our slippers are on, our feet spread out towards the blaze, and our drinks at our elbows, when the whole world and something beyond the world opens itself to our minds as we talk, and no one has any claim or responsibility for another, but all are freemen and equal, as if we had first met an hour ago, while at the same time an affection mellowed by the years enfolds us. Life, natural life, has no better gift to give. So I'm not going to go too much further into that. We'll talk a little bit more about it on the After Dark, but they would have a major friendship, and Tolkien would call Lewis his closest friend from about 1927 to 1940.
Mhm.
Um, they would not always remain as close, but they had a major friendship. I want to read a little bit about life at Oxford, and then we are going to bust into the major works, and we'll probably go for about another hour, take a break, come back for the After Dark. And I think we can expect 45 minutes to an hour for the After Dark, too. So if you can't get enough of this, you know where to go. So, until the late 19th century, the holders of most college fellowships at Oxford, that is, the majority of teachers in the university, had to take holy orders and were not permitted to marry until they were marry while they remained in office. The reformers of that era introduced non clerical fellowships and abolished the requirement of celibacy. In so doing, they changed the face of Oxford and changed it visibly. For in the years that followed, a tide of brick flowed steadily northwards from the old boundary of the city, covering the fields along the Banbury and Woodstock roads, as the speculators erected hundreds of homes for the new married dons. By the beginning of the 20th century, North Oxford was a concentrated colony of academics, their wives, their children, and their servants, its inhabitants occupying a variety of mansions ranging from the Gothic and palatial, complete with turrets and stained glass, to the frankly suburban villa. Churches, schools, and clusters of shops were erected to serve the needs of this strange community, and soon few acres were left unoccupied. There was, however, a small amount of building still in progress during the 1920s, and in one of the North Oxford streets, Tolkien found and bought a modest new house, L-shaped and of pale brick, with one wing running towards the road. The family traveled down from Leeds at the beginning of 1926 and moved in. Here in Northmoor Road, they remained for 21 years. Later in 1929, a larger neighboring house was vacated by Basil Blackwell, the bookseller and publisher, and the Tolkiens decided to buy it, moving from number 22 to number 20 early in the next year. This second house was broad and gray, more imposing than its neighbor, with small leaded windows and a high slate roof. Shortly before the move, a fourth and last child was born, and this would be Priscilla. So let's see here. There's this great section in this book where he imagines a day in the life of Tolkien at Oxford, based on fact and sort of what we know about the period. I'm not going to read all of it because it's like 3 or 4 pages, but I'm going to read a little bit of it. It is a saint's day, so it begins early. The alarm rings at 7 in Tolkien's bedroom, a back room that looks east over the garden. It is really a bathroom come dressing room, and there is a bath in one corner of it, but he sleeps here because Edith finds his snoring tiresome and because he keeps late hours that do not harmonize with her habits. So they have their own rooms and do not disturb one another. He gets up unwillingly. He has never been an early riser by nature, decides to shave after Mass, and goes in his dressing gown along the passage to the boys' bedroom to wake Michael and Christopher. John, the eldest boy, is now aged 14 and away at a Catholic boarding school in Berkshire. But the two younger sons, aged 11 and 7 respectively, are still living at home. Going into Michael's bedroom, Tolkien nearly trips over a model railway engine that has been left in the middle of the floor. He curses to himself. Michael and Christopher have a passion for railways at the moment, and they have devoted a complete upstairs room to a track layout. They also go to watch engines and draw with impressive precision pictures of Great Western Railway locomotives. Tolkien does not understand or really approve of what he calls their railway mania. To him, railways only mean noise and dirt and the despoiling of the countryside, but he tolerates the hobby and can even be persuaded on occasion to take them on expeditions to a distant station to watch the Cheltenham Flyer pass through, train spotting. When he has woken the boys, he gets dressed in his usual weekday outfit of flannel trousers and tweed jacket. Then he and his sons, who are wearing their dark blue dragon school jackets and shorts, get their bicycles out of the garage and set off along the silent Northmoor Road, where the bedroom curtains are still drawn in other houses, up Linton Road and into the broad Banbury Road, where the occasional car or bus passes them on its way into the city. It is a spring morning, and there is a fine display of blossom on the cherry trees that hang over the pavements from the front gardens. They bicycle 3/4 of a mile into town to St. Aloysius's Catholic Church, an unlovely edifice next to the hospital in the Woodstock Road. Mass is at 7:30, so by the time they get home, they are just a few minutes late for breakfast. All right, so there's more there, but you can kind of get the idea. There's a certain idyllicness to this. He's definitely a man who's where he belongs. And I think having survived being made an orphan at 12, death of your father, death of your mother, being, sort of handed around to different people, boarding, looking after your younger brother, falling in love, being told to wait for 3 years, helping bust up an engagement, nearly dying in the trenches, losing two of your best friends in the same battle. I mean, yeah, and good for him. Where are you at? Where are you at with old Tolkien here?
I'm happy for him. And it makes me, between hearing this and the Lewis stuff I'm reading, it's like Oxford, especially back then in academia, you could pursue these sort of passions and get paid for it. And it sets you up to have friends who are of like mind. And, pursue your own writing projects, which for Tolkien and Lewis became staggeringly successful. But it does seem like after all that turmoil, you kind of settle into your father of four and you can pursue your passions. Doesn't sound half bad.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a stigma around what he was doing. Like I think even toward the end, when they were retiring, it would always be about the work in philology, right? Like this stuff was sort of it's not serious, right? Since then,
Yeah.
I'm sure that's changed, but yeah, and there were. I think there's a moment where he finishes. I think it's either The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings. I think it might be when The Lord of the Rings comes out, and all his colleagues are like, "Oh, it's time that you give a lecture."
Yeah.
You've been busy, So I don't know how grudging anyone was. I mean, he clearly kept his position, but there was definitely something about being the tenured professor of XYZ that just gave you an extraordinary amount of status. It
Yeah.
still does, but I don't think there's anything like being a professor of Oxford at that period of time.
Yeah, I do get the
Yeah.
sense I don't know, especially like European colleges, but it seems like academia has changed
Mm.
quite a bit. And I mean, I don't do they even have a nobody talks about philology anymore. There's
I don't even know what.
linguistics,
Yeah, I think it would be
right? Like,
linguistics.
yeah. It seems like there's been a hard pivot towards the hard sciences and I don't know, frankly, American academia, a big portion of it seems silly and a lot of, political and whatnot. I don't know. This seems like a nostalgic time for just scholarship, you know, the end of an era.
Mm. Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, because it's before World War II. It's just that right in the middle. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, the old world has sort of fading away, but maybe it hasn't touched Oxford so much yet. I mean, and I read in the biography that they never owned like a dishwasher. He really didn't like gadgets. He didn't like these
Hmm.
old,
Yeah.
he or these newfangled things, which I think tracks. I mean, he was sort of cottage core before cottage core, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was just
yeah,
your preference. Yeah.
yeah. I don't think Tolkien's getting on Twitter. Although he
No.
would have been an incredible podcaster. I was thinking I would splice some of this into the show, but we sort of haven't done that for a while, so I'll probably leave it sit. But I do want to say that there are quality recordings of him reading from The Lord of the Rings. Somebody put him in front of a tape recorder at one point, and he made recordings. So if you want to hear
Yeah.
Tolkien in his own voice, those are very, very easy to find. I'm not going to
Yeah.
jam them in here, but you can always seek that out with one quick search. All right, so let's press on. Um, yeah. So in the 1930s, Tolkien began the book that became The Hobbit, The Hobbit. It is important to hear its tone. Yeah, you gotta read it. So let me see here. Let's. Oh, I got
Yeah.
my copy.
All
All
right.
right. So yeah, yeah, and of course we're gonna read this for book club. Uh, and I love it. We got the map. We got the map. We got the dragon smog. The Hobbit movies are just not they're just not as
They're
good
not good. Nope.
they're not great. And I think it could have been one movie and
It
not
is
three.
one, there is one good 2.5 hour long movie in there. It's not three. And they tried to make it three, and
Yeah.
it's not
I
good.
don't I
Yeah.
don't think it's like garbage, but it feels kind of like noise. It doesn't
I
like
didn't even,
land.
I didn't even see the third. I saw the
Yeah.
first two, and
Yeah.
I was like, it's not even,
Yeah, it's just
yeah.
it's sort of missing the pathos. I mean, it's yeah, I think they got it wrong, which is a bummer because of course Lord of the Rings they nailed.
Yep. And
Yeah,
because there's
so
enough source material there. There's not, there's the book, there's not three movies in there. And you just can't
yeah,
stretch it and maintain any
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
narrative cohesion
I
or
wonder
tension.
why. Yeah, I mean, because the whole thing needs to focus just utterly on Bilbo
Yep.
and
There's too much
Smog,
extras. Yep.
and
Oh,
yeah, yeah, and not. I don't really care about the dwarves or the politics of Dwarfland. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, here we go. Chapter one: the Hobbit, an unexpected party. Uh, Matt, can you in the background, because I've talked a hell of a lot in this episode. Of course, that's the franchise of the show, right? But do you have a copy of The Lord of the Rings or any of the books, or do you
Not
find a PDF?
No, well, it is. There is a copy in the room next door. I can go get it. I happen to be reading this with my 5-year-old son. Every night we read 5 pages. We're almost
The
done
Hobbit. The
of the
Hobbit.
Hobbit. Yeah.
Well, go and
Let me
grab
go
it.
get
Go and
it. All
grab it.
right,
I'll
all
let
right,
you
all
read because
right.
my throat's starting to get to me. So you
Okay.
go and
Yeah,
grab
yeah.
it, and I'll yeah.
Back.
Awesome. All right. So I'm gonna enlist Matt to read a little bit of the Hobbit, but I'm in the middle of the book now. Must we go any further? Asked Bilbo. When it was so dark that he could only see Thorin's beard wagging beside him, and so quiet that he could hear the dwarves breathing like a loud noise. My toes are all bruised and bent, and my legs ache, and my stomach is wagging like an empty sack. A bit further, said Gandalf. After what seemed ages further, they came suddenly to an opening where no trees grew. The moon was up and was shining into the clearing. Somehow it struck all of them as not at all a nice place, although there was nothing wrong to see. All of a sudden, they heard a howl away down the hill, away downhill, a long, shuddering howl. It was answered by another away to the right and a good deal nearer to them. Then by another not far away to the left. It was wolves howling at the moon, wolves gathering together. I'm going to ask Matt to read from the very beginning, just read maybe 3 or 4 paras.
All right.
It's interesting.
What did you just read?
Oh, I just read something from the very middle.
The middle. Okay, okay.
Yeah, just, and he was so attentive to detail that there was a whole bit in the biography about him going back over the proofs of like The Hobbit and or The Lord of the Rings, making sure that the way he described the moon and time and their journeying and how far they went and time passing all tracks, all accurate, nothing's thrown away. I think it's one of the things he kind of resented about Lewis is that Lewis had all this success with these Narnia books, but compared to his work, it's a little glib.
Lewis can come across as slapdash compared
Yeah, and
to
that's fine. I
Tolkien.
mean, these
Yeah.
are children's books about a lion, a witch, and a wardrobe. So, there's this lightness to the Lewis books that where Tolkien went the exact opposite direction. Tolkien's like, oh, here's a fun children's story about a dragon and a little man who goes to defeat the dragon. Then it becomes this like battle between the forces of good and evil
Yeah.
at the most
There's,
ultimate level. Yeah.
there's a lot there. I've been thinking about it. I'll save it for book club. But yeah, there's a lot as we read through this, or I read through it with my son. There's a lot there. And then let me see. And look at this tiny little, this is what made me get reading glasses because this book specifically, it's such tiny print. But all right, here we go. Oh, I'll do the hole in the Hobbit. There's a little introduction here. He actually wrote out the little runes. I'm looking at that right now. It's okay. Sorry. Chapter 1, An Unexpected Party. In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. It had a perfectly round door like a porthole, painted green, with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened up to a tube-shaped hall like a tunnel, a very comfortable tunnel without smoke, with paneled walls and floors tiled and carpeted, provided with polished chairs and lots of pegs for hats and coats. The hobbit was fond of visitors. The tunnel wound on and on, going fairly but not quite straight up into the side of the hill. The hill, as all the people for many miles round called it, and many little round doors opened out of it, first on one side and then on another. No going upstairs for the hobbit. Bedrooms, bathrooms, cellars, pantries, lots of these, wardrobes. He had whole rooms devoted to clothes. Kitchens, dining rooms, all were on the same floor, and indeed on the same passage. The best rooms were on the left side, going in, for these were the only ones to have windows, deep-set round windows looking over his garden, and meadows beyond sloping down the river.
Time and place sets you in time and place. Yeah, it's nice. It's just high quality prose.
Mm-hmm.
Really is. I
He's
mean, he's just
it,
a fantastic writer.
yeah, yep. And he's setting the scene for the comfort, very comfortable hobbit in a nice, pleasant, Oxfordian, world,
Sure.
and he's gonna get the call to adventure, and half of him wants to go, half of him is like no, you know, and that's the hero's journey. That's all. That's the essence of myth.
I saw something on Twitter recently about how incredible the work was in The Lord of the Rings in maintaining that illusion that these are like little hobbits and how many shots are
Yeah.
taken for granted. How they would like do these weird perspective shots, and there are these tells if you know what you're looking for in some of the shots where the table is like broken in half and in the foreground it's one thing and then they actually have a separate table behind it and just all of these like perspective shots and like in Bilbo's little house, just all that stuff is just so cool. And the Lord of the Rings movies are really told through the perspective of the hobbits, and I think that's one of their strengths. It brings you into that perspective of small people facing an impossibly big world. I think in everybody's heart there's a bit of that feeling that it's sort of you
Oh
and
yeah.
your little family up against just forces that are so beyond your ken. All you can do is move forward and look after each other.
I mean, that's the big part of the appeal. We did it. There will be books on The Hobbit a while ago, but it's on Spotify if you want to search it. But in
Yeah.
we I ran across in my research for that, there's the hobbits are so small because part of it is they're Western man compared to the heroes of old, right?
Mm,
So we're very
mm,
comfortable. We're in this little world. There's dangers outside, but we don't quite realize it. And compared to our bygone heroes, we're kind of physically tiny, but a few of us are up for the job,
mm.
right? That's kind of the essence
I'm
of
gonna
it there.
I'm going to read a few paragraphs from the Tolkien estate. An unexpected story. The first spark of the story came in the summer of 1930 when the author was already 38 years old. In the middle of grading a huge stack of more than 200 student essays, he jotted down on a blank sheet the words, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." Having imagined the word hobbit on the spot, he asked himself what sort of a creature a hobbit might be, and soon started a story about a stay at home little person obviously owing something to the Hobbs and Brownies of traditional folklore, who unexpectedly is asked to leave the safety of his daily routine and go off on an adventure. This first phase of the story consisted only of the first chapter, but within that short space, Tolkien introduced hobbits as a people, Bilbo himself. Although I think the name for Bilbo originally was like Bongo or something. It was
Bungo.
not
Yeah.
Bungo, yeah, Bungo. Bilbo himself and the wizard, the dwarves, and the quest, even though Gandalf is called Bledorthin, and Smaug is still named Priftin. So yeah, he started it, stopped it, and then he returned to it a year later. Obviously, he's busy. Most of his work in The Hobbit went on in spurts during the vacations over the next 2 years. And here's what he said. I can remember sitting one summer with a pile of dreary exam papers in a chair near the front window of my study at 20 Northmore Road. I came across a blessed blank page and scrawled on it, "In a hole in the ground lived a hobbit." And he just, that's called inspiration.
Yeah.
Um, and Bilbo is more real than a lot of people walking the earth right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah. So everything came in here, right? His scholarship, his stories for his children, his legendarium, the Silmarillion, and his linguistic inventions. He invented languages, the secret vice, which absorbed so much of his creative energy. It's all kind of there. Many of the proper names Bilbo encounters after leaving Bag End are Sindarin Elvish or Noldorin, which it was called at the time, Elrond, Gondolin, Orcrist, Glamdring, Galleon, Esgaroth, Girion, Bledorthin, etc. Their juxtaposition alongside the Old Norse names of Bilbo's companions creates a feeling of a prehistory, which I think we know. Um, yeah, cool. All right. So it ends up getting published in September of 1937, and it is an immediate success. His first published work of fiction, and that's how we know him, right? We would only know him in a niche academic way, and so The Hobbit becomes a big deal. And of course, what happens if you have a publisher who's selling your children's book like hotcakes? They want another one, right? Um, and he had the sketches of the Silmarillion, but it's not like we want more of Bilbo. We want more of that world, right? That's what we really want. So there really wasn't anything for them to publish. So there's an interlude here before he moves on to the Lord of the Rings, and this is where he delivered a public or like a lecture called Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics, which is one of the most influential essays in modern medieval studies. In 1939, he delivered a lecture on fairy stories. So these were like this is his public intellectual life, kind of being married to his convictions about the writing of fiction. Um, so let's see here. I want to read more from the estate about these two pieces to kind of give them their due. It's very tempting in an episode like this just to cleave to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and kind of let everything else fall to the wayside. But but this is important. Let's see here. Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics. The piece, which provides the volume's title, so this would later be published in the 80s by his estate, comes from a 1936 lecture to the British Academy on Beowulf, the Monsters and the Critics. This lecture entirely changed the course of Beowulf studies. So again, had he never written The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, he'd still have a Wikipedia profile. It just wouldn't be, 10 pages long. It's one of the most frequently cited academic papers of all time in the humanities. Briefly, before Tolkien, general scholarly opinion held first that the poem, as we have it, is a hodgepodge of different items unskillfully put together by a light reviser. And then, once this view became untenable, that while the poem might after all be unified, it was nevertheless unfortunate that the poet had chosen to tell stories about a hero, or ogres, and a dragon instead of detailing the wars in the north to which he often provocatively alludes. Tolkien's lecture strongly and sometimes ironically defends the poet's decision and the poem itself. The poet had every right to choose fantasy rather than history as his subject. In doing so, he universalized his theme. His many allusions to events not recounted gave his work depth. Most of all, the poem offered a kind of negotiation between the poet's own firmly Christian world and the world of his pagan ancestors, on whom he looked back with admiration and pity. It could be argued that in several ways, what Tolkien said of the anonymous Anglo-Saxon poet was true of himself and his own fictional works, especially The Lord of the Rings, which he began the year after he gave this lecture. Little more here. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. After Beowulf, the ancient work most important to Tolkien was probably the medieval romance of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which Tolkien both edited and translated in modern English. In his essay printed The Monsters and the Critics, he gives a review of the poem, which is characteristically personal and which furthermore stresses not heroic difference, but Catholic continuity. A critical moment in the poem, Tolkien argues, is the one where Sir Gawain, having improperly agreed to conceal his acceptance of the lady's girdle from her husband, goes to confession and receives absolution. But should he not have confessed his sin? If he did, surely he should have made amends by returning the girdle. Or did the poet not notice any contradiction? Tolkien argues that the last option is impossible, as it would reduce the poet to a mere bungler. Rather, he says, Gawain's failure is a breach not of the Christian moral code, but of an aristocratic game code, which the poet was concerned to show as definitely subordinate to the Christian one. While the poem contains interesting reminiscences of and survivals from pagan antiquity, these two should not be allowed to dominate interpretation. All right, a little bit dry, but just a reminder that he's a real academic who made an indelible mark on our understanding of these Old English tales. But you're here for The Hobbit, you're here for The Lord of the Rings. Let's be real. That's what you got to give the people what they want. It gets the people going. You got to put a ring on it. Mm. So, Matt, what's your just again to just give me 90 seconds to like catch my breath and everything. My throat is kind of doing these episodes. We're winding into the home stretch here because of course we're going to talk about the Lord of the Rings. And he's already by the time it's published, I believe he's 60 years old. So we're getting up in years. What's your relationship to Tolkien? When did you first encounter these books? I mean, you're reading The Hobbit to your children. I'm going to do the same. When did you first read the Lord of the Rings books? Do you remember?
When I was little, they were them and Lewis were the Narnia books were kind of what was around and what we read a lot. I think The Hobbit, I must have been read to me when I was, 5 or 6 or something. I remember one of the best, in a weird way, one of the best days I had when I was a kid. I didn't like school when I was a kid, and so I was sick in like second or third grade, and I got to stay home, and I just read The Hobbit on my own in bed, and that was a really good day. So I have a great deal of affection, nostalgic and otherwise, for The Hobbit in particular. And I did The Lord of the Rings later, and I always liked, for whatever reason, my personal favorite is that first book one of The Lord of the Rings, kind of the Shire parts where they figure out what the ring is and he's got to leave and they're being chased by the Black Riders.
Mm.
That's always been my personal favorite.
Yeah, it's so
Oh,
great. It's so
yeah.
great. The call to adventure, and it's just so good in the movie too, how they render it in the film.
Those movies were they're as good as you can get, as we're ever gonna get. I think we're lucky we got them. I was thinking of this. I read across Christopher Tolkien's opinion of the movies, and he didn't like them, which I will grant because he's so familiar with the original work and his father wrote them. But he said Peter Jackson turned it into a much deeper work into just an action movie with swords and it's like I understand the criticism, but it's also the sword stuff is also what kids like about the original work at first. That's what you like about the books. And then I know there's a lot of people who are into them young. You stick with them and you reread them periodically. And that deeper stuff doesn't sink in until you're an adult and you can metabolize it. And I think, so that's that swords and sorcery element is present in the books, and it's what's going to hook you when you're young. You're not going to the importance of myth and the call to adventure and all that stuff. When you're 7 or 8, you're not going to pick up on that.
Yeah, yeah.
But
No, they're great. They're great, and I even love that the prequel is more childish than the final, big great book.
oh yeah, it gets
It,
much
it's like
darker.
it's like the whole thing matures as it goes on,
Mhm.
which is on its own like kind of beautiful. Um, there's an interlude here where he pursues the publication of the Silmarillion along with the Lord of the Rings, and he basically maneuvers his first publisher out of publishing, like releasing him. He's very tricky about it, a little bit cynical, but then the second publisher that he found that fell through. So then he comes back to the first publisher, Unwin, and Rayner Unwin did not have to be asked twice. So he offers him The Lord of the Rings finally. He suggested that Tolkien should send the manuscript of The Lord of the Rings to Allen and Unwin at once by registered post, but Tolkien only had one typescript of the book in its final and revised form, and he did not want to consign it to the post. He wanted to hand it over in person, and as it happened, that was not possible for some weeks. During August, he was on holiday in Ireland, and in the same month, he visited George Sayre, a friend of C.S. Lewis, who taught at Malvern College and who often visited the Inklings. While Tolkien was staying with Sayre in Worcestershire, his host recorded him reading and singing from The Hobbit and from the typescript of The Lord of the Rings, which he had brought with him. When he listened to these recordings, Tolkien was much surprised to discover their effectiveness as recitations, and, if I may say so, my own effectiveness as a narrator. Many years later, after Tolkien's death, the tapes made on this occasion were issued on long-playing gramophone records. So you can go and find those if you want to hear Tolkien's voice. He'd never before encountered a tape recorder at close quarters. He pretended to regard Sayre's machine with great suspicion, pronouncing the Lord's Prayer in Gothic into the microphone to cast out any devils that might be lurking within. So, in any case, kind of fun. I
Mhm.
like this idea. He's got a bit of a Luddite spirit, right? Like he's sort of
Yeah.
dwelling with the fairies and the elves already, right? And the elves don't know what this tape recorder is, right? What is this? Eccentric. I think it's fair to say we have an eccentric on our hands.
Sure. I think it's perfectly acceptable too. And I think
Yeah,
he's kind of right. You look at
yeah.
where we are now, the
I
AI and
agree.
stuff.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. So do you have a copy of the Fellowship of the Ring? Do
Stand up.
you,
It's
you want to
right
grab
over
it?
here.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
grab it, and do you care to read from the beginning of it?
I can do that. Yeah.
That's great. So the Fellowship of the Ring. So there's much back and forth. The Silmarillion was not published in his lifetime. There's really no audience for it. They took a huge risk. Allen and Unwin, at one point, one of them wrote, "We could lose 1,000 pounds on this." And the other one was like, "Do it," or his son or something. One of the guy was like, "Do it. It's a work of genius." They believed it was a work of genius. They were willing to risk a not small amount of money. And of course, that time, 1,000 pounds would have been quite a lot more. The Fellowship of the Ring appeared in 1954. Tolkien wanted it all to be one book. They said, no, we got to split it. The Two Towers in November of 1954, and The Return of the King of 1955. And this is the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring that Matt is going to read.
All right. My reading copy, no cover, no back, beat up. I scour the used bookstores for another copy, but I refuse to buy movie tie-in covers, or especially
Oh,
the ones to the new show, which is
okay.
not good. So
Right. Yeah,
I'm
yeah, you don't
rolling
want
with
that.
my
You
old.
don't want that cursing your shelf. Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
no.
absolutely. Completely agree. Yeah, your copy has been scourged. It's like the scourging of the Shire. But a
It's
good
it's
thing.
it's from the 70s. It's like an old,
I love it.
like from the 70s. So
Very good.
yeah, and there's a part I love from just the intro. I see if I can find it before I get into the
Yeah, read whatever you'd like.
oh,
Yeah, just give me
on
another short break while I can catch my breath here. And we're going to wind down and then take a break and come
all
back
right.
after dark.
So he's talking about the reception. This is from the foreword after the book has kind of been successful, and he's talking about the reception among some of the critics of the books, and how he came to tell the story. The prime motive was the desire of a tale teller to try his hand at a really long story that would hold the attention of readers, amuse them, delight them, and at times maybe excite them or deeply move them. As a guide, I had only my own feelings for what is appealing or moving, and for many, the guide was inevitably often at fault. Some who have read the book, or at any rate have reviewed it, have found it boring, absurd, or contemptible, and I have no cause to complain, since I have similar opinions of their own works or of the kinds of writing that they evidently prefer. That's maybe my favorite line in the whole book, a little dig at the critics, and kind of the unacknowledged reality amongst a lot of the critics to this day, I think, who dismiss it as childish. I don't think they've actually read it. I think they assume because of the subject matter, it's child stuff and dismiss it as such. But I like that. I have similar views of their own work, so I'm not going to complain about your criticisms.
Love it.
Yeah. All right. Let me
Take,
do this first little chunk from
yeah, just read the first, few paras from book one of, The
yeah.
Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah. And especially in that first chapter, you can tell it's kind of it was billed and started as a sequel. So this from chapter one, a long expected party, contrasted with chapter one of The Hobbit as an unexpected party. So when Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 111st birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. Bilbo was very rich and very peculiar, and had been the wonder of the Shire for 60 years, ever since his remarkable disappearance and unexpected return. The riches he had brought back from his travels had now become a local legend, and it was popularly believed, whatever the old folk might say, that the hill at Bag End was full of tunnels stuffed with treasure. And if that was not enough for fame, there was also his prolonged vigor to marvel at. Time wore on, but it seemed to have little effect on Mr. Baggins. At 90, he was much the same as at 50. At 99, they began to call him well preserved, but unchanged would have been been near the mark. There were some that shook their heads and thought this was too much of a good thing. It seemed unfair that anyone should possess, apparently, perpetual youth as well as, reputedly, inexhaustible wealth. It will have to be paid for, they said. It isn't natural, and trouble will come of it.
They're not wrong. And
Yeah.
yeah, so the ring grants him this perpetual like life, essentially.
Longer
Just
life, but at
longer
at a
life.
cost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, at a cost. I mean, the cost that ends up being paid is Frodo. Frodo pays the cost,
Mm.
in a sense. I mean, Bilbo kind of skates, but
Yeah.
yeah.
You can see
Tol
him shifting the tone too, because I think when he originally wrote The Hobbit, it's the ring's a magic gadget that turns you invisible. Cool. And then he starts thinking of the sequel and melding the Silmarillion lore in with what becomes the Lord of the Rings. And you can even see that first paragraph is him like, okay, so the ring is not what we have first assumed. There's a price to
hmm
be paid. All that stuff blends in
Yeah.
really well. Yeah.
Yeah. He does a really, really fine job. Um, so these books make him world famous. And he, uh, in 1953, in that letter, this is where he describes it as a fundamentally Catholic work. Um, we'll talk about that more on the After Dark. Uh, and they make him rich. He never has to worry about money again. A lot of it's taken by taxes, this being England. But I mean, he makes enough that again,
He's set.
he's quite yeah, he's set.
Yeah.
Which I mean, and this is he did not come from money. I mean, they were always going to be okay, but this is a different level. Um, so a little bit here about how it takes off in America. Okay, um, I think this is fascinating. So there's this whole thing that happens where there is a an edition of the Lord of the Rings that is published by a company called Ace. The publishers were Ace Books. They alleged there was nothing illegal in their paper, but they published an unauthorized version that was cheaper because it took off at colleges and universities, and 20, 30 cents back then and buy you it was a week of coffee, right? So students were buying that. Um, Even though it was printed entirely without the permission of Tolkien or his authorized publishers, and even though no royalty payments had been offered to the author. Indeed, the Ace edition had also been manufactured with some care, so that it was quite a bargain at 75 cents for each volume. There were a number of errors in the typesetting, but on the whole, the printers had reproduced Tolkien's text accurately, ludicrously so, since they had included both the promise in the foreword of the index of names and the note at the end apologizing for its absence. He there was a whole index of names that was meant to be included, but then he never got around to it. I don't know if he ever got around to it, but they were so fastidious in their publishing that they got everything, including, I mean, they could have just left that out. Ace were already well known as publishers of science fiction, and clearly a lot of people were going to buy their edition until an authorized paperback could be issued. An urgent request was sent to Tolkien to complete the revisions as soon as possible. So he had to work through all this revising. Then in 1965, so we're in Beatles time now, right? The authorized paperback of The Lord of the Rings was published in America in 3 volumes with Tolkien's revisions incorporated and with the emus and Christmas tree on the cover of the first volume. He hated the covers. They were like, this has nothing to do with my story. They were like emus and like a Christmas tree, which I think is very funny. Though the picture was later removed and one of Tolkien's own drawings was substituted. He could doodle, he could draw. Two more of his pictures were used for the second and third volumes. Each copy carried a message from Tolkien. This paperback edition and no other has been published with my consent and cooperation. Those who approve of courtesy, at least, to living authors will purchase it and no other. So, unfortunately, it didn't quite do the trick until he started getting correspondence from obsessive Americans. And any American who would write him, he would write back saying, tell people the Ace edition is unauthorized. Tell your friends. And that worked. American readers not only began to refuse to buy the Ace editions, but demanded, often in forcible terms, that booksellers remove it from their shelves. A fan club, the Tolkien Society of America, which had recently been formed, now joined in the battle. By the end of the year, the sales of Ace copies began to fall sharply, and when the cause was taken up by the Science Fiction Writers of America, an influential body that now applied considerable pressure to Ace, the result was that Ace wrote to Tolkien offering to pay him a royalty for every copy they had sold, and stating that they would not reprint after their present stocks had been exhausted. So a treaty was signed, and the war over Middle-earth, as one journalist had dubbed it, came to an end. But the most important consequence was yet to come. The dispute had attracted considerable publicity, and as a result, Tolkien's name and the titles of his books were now very widely known in America. Approximately 100,000 copies of the Ace edition of The Lord of the Rings had been sold. in 1965, but this figure was soon passed by the authorized paperback, which quickly reached the 1 million mark, like a sensation. I mean, if you can sell 10,000 books now, you're like,
Yeah.
it's incredible. Ace had unwittingly done a service to Tolkien, for they had helped to lift the book from the respectable hardcover status in which it had languished for some years, and had put it at the top of the popular bestsellers. And by now, a campus cult had begun. Um, let's see here. The wildfire of this American enthusiasm spread to other countries. At festivities in Saigon, a Vietnamese dancer was seen bearing the lidless eye of Sauron on his shield, and in North Borneo, a Frodo Society was formed. At about the same time, interest in Tolkien's books showed a marked increase in Britain, partly because those who had first read them as children were now reaching adulthood and were communicating their enthusiasm to their friends, and partly as a reflection of the cult that had grown up in America. British sales of the books rose sharply. A Tolkien Society began to meet in London and elsewhere in the country. Students of Warwick University renamed the ring road around their campus Tolkien Road, and a psychedelic magazine entitled Gandalf's Garden Man was issued with the avowed objective to bring beautiful people together. Hell yeah. Its first issue explained that Gandalf is fast becoming absorbed in the youthful world spirit as the mythological hero of the age. Um, yeah. As for Tolkien himself, writing to a colleague, he referred to the widespread enthusiasm for his books as my deplorable cultus. And to a reporter who asked him if he was pleased by the enthusiasm of the young Americans, he replied, art moves them, and they don't know what they've been moved by, and they get quite drunk on it. Many young Americans are involved in the stories in a way that I am not. So, all right. Great success. And here's what he wrote to one reader. Like, people would start visiting his house and asking him for money and stuff, like, and wanting him. I
Oh,
mean, he was a celebrity, right? I
yeah.
mean, it was causing some problems, right? They'd be disturbed. You know, Americans would make pilgrimages. People, not just Americans. Here's what he wrote to a reader. Being a cult figure in one's own lifetime, I'm afraid, is not at all pleasant. However, I do not find that it tends to puff one up. In my case, at any rate, it makes me feel extremely small and inadequate. But even the nose of a very modest idol cannot remain entirely untickled by the sweet smell of incense. All right.
Yeah.
So he's made it. And he's got these four children. They're all grown. There's a lot of correspondence with his son Christopher, who would, I believe, become his, um, you know, his literary executor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's more work. A story called Leaf by Niggle in 1945, Farmer Giles of Ham, 49. These are all before the homecoming of Baronoth Bertham's son in 1953, Tom Bombadil, 62, Smith of Wotton Manor, 67. We just didn't just write The Lord of the Rings, but of course it's the thing that he's known for. Um, in 1945, Tolkien had moved from Pembroke to Merton, different college. So, like, Oxford is like a series of colleges, that all kind of fly under the same banner of Oxford. Um, his relationship with Lewis had long cooled off. Um, Lewis, and I'm not going to steal your thunder, Matt, but Lewis would pass in 1963. That'll be next month on the podcast. Matt's prepping that now. Tolkien wrote that it felt like an axe blow near the roots, so it affected him. And I'm sure we'll learn more about that on the Lewis core episode. He retired in 1959. By then, The Lord of the Rings was had transformed his life, and he became something strange, an elderly professor who was also one of the most beloved authors in the world. In 1968, he and Edith moved from Oxford to Bournemouth, hoping for quiet and seclusion. In 1972, he received the CBE, and that is the Order of the British Empire. It's a commander of the British Empire. So I think that means he was knighted. CBE, or Commander of the Order of the British Empire, is the highest ranking Order of the British Empire awarded in England. So maybe it's a knighthood, but it's something. it's a,
I
it's
think so. I
a
get all
high
that
honor.
mixed up, but yeah.
It's a high honor. Okay, you get a medal. You get to meet the queen. Um, yeah. So I don't know if it's technically a knighthood, but again, our friendly British listeners, English listeners, if you want to correct us, we don't get everything right on every pass, but we do our damn best. I tell you what. Um, so they go to Bournemouth, and now he can secure more privacy. I think at one point they maybe moved out of the house in Oxford, but anyway, it's yeah, very few people live a life like this. And I can see an alternative where maybe this thing never got published or the right spark didn't hit, and maybe like after his life, but he got to see it. He got to see his myth conquer the world to the point where he was
Yeah.
even like one of these like comic book authors who are like, dude, it's Batman. Don't take it that seriously. Like, you're not
Yeah.
Robin, okay? Like at the Comic Con signing somebody's
Yeah.
tattoo, somebody's Batman tattoo. It's like, okay, all right. I mean,
Yeah.
but that's what, how do you set out to create a myth and then be like, oh, people are treating this too mythically? It's like you did
People
it.
see, yep, yep, and people read their own. That's the beauty of myth is you can read your own circumstance, your own worldview into it. Yeah, he struck a nerve. Yeah, I don't think you realize how big the vein was or how
Mm.
rich the mine was or whatever. But yeah, it
Sure,
is
sure.
interesting.
But it's like
Yeah.
that Hobbit came out of his pen. I mean, it just happened. So they're living at this seaside town, Bournemouth, which the impression is it serves its purpose. It provides a setting in which elderly people of some affluence can be comfortable and can spend their time with others of their age and class. It's Palm Beach or whatever it is. I don't even know. It's where Jerry Seinfeld's parents, retire,
But yeah,
right?
Del
Yeah,
Boca
yeah.
Vista.
Del Boca
Yeah,
Vista. Yeah, right. When Kramer goes down there, they use him. They're going to be president of Del Boca Vista.
yeah. Yeah.
He's got
So
charisma. This guy.
that's another thing for the our listeners in the UK is like is Bournemouth the Del Boca Vista
That's what we want to
of
know.
Britain? Yeah.
Yeah, get into the Discord and let us know. Is it still the Del Boca Vista of the United Kingdom? Um, and then they're at Miramar, and he's spending more time with his wife. Let's see here. At the Miramar, she felt entirely at home. Edith, back in her own milieu, as she had never been in Oxford or at any other time during her married life. Being the wife of a professor with kids, you can about imagine. True, many of the other guests at the hotel were titled, rich, and self assured, yet they were all essentially of the same breed conservative, glad to talk about their own children and grandchildren and about mutual acquaintances, happy to pass most of the day in the residence lounge with occasional interruptions for walks by the sea. This is Del Boca Vista, content to sit over their post-prandial coffee and watch the 9 o'clock news in the television room before going to bed. That sounds like paradise. So Tolkien was not particularly happy there. He shared little of Edith's delight in the type of person, as C.S. Lewis expressed it, whose general conversation is almost wholly narrative. They're not talking about ideas, right? They're talking about the weather, their next surgery, their grandkids. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
hilarious. Yeah, these guys are Oxford to Del Boca Vista. That's a very different. At one point, W.H. Auden would pay a visit and then write this. He lives in a hideous house. I cannot tell you how hideous, with hideous pictures. He said this at a meeting of the Tolkien Society in New York, and his words were reported in a London newspaper. Tolkien read them and remarked, since it is some years since his sole visit, in which he only entered Edith's room and had tea, he must be confused in his memories if he really said just this. It was a calm reaction to an insulting remark, and after showing a little initial displeasure in a letter to Auden, Tolkien was soon writing cordially to him once more. So
Oh.
who knows? Auden may have been drunk.
Auden was the only serious literary guy at the time who got Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
Like
is that
every
right?
Edmund Wilson, all the serious critics at the time are like children's stuff. Probably didn't even read it. Auden wrote a fantastic essay called "The Questing Hero," and he really got the nub of it, got why it was important, and so that's funny. That's interesting. Just a,
Mm,
oops.
mm. Yeah, so he's still working on that's fascinating. I didn't know that. So he's still working on his what he would call sub-creation, which means the mythology underpinning, narrative. Sometimes he would put in long hours at his desk, but on other days he would soon turn to a game of patience, I think solitaire. And he invented a bunch of different forms of solitaire apparently, and abandoned any pretense of work. He had the good tism. Abandon any pretense of working. Then there might be a good lunch at the Miramar with plenty of wine, and if he did not feel like doing any work after it, why should he? They could wait for the book. He would take his time. Yet, on other days, he was distressed that time was leaking away so fast with the book still unfinished. And at the end of 1971, the Bournemouth episode came abruptly to a close. Edith, aged 82, was taken ill in the middle of November with an inflamed gallbladder. She was removed to hospital, and after a few days of severe illness, she died early on Monday, the 29th of November. Beautiful story. Sad.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to outlive the other, unless you die in a plane crash or a car crash.
Made
Um,
it to 82.
yeah, good long
Not bad.
life.
Not bad.
Bastard
Yeah.
child. Married one of the greatest artists of the century.
A
Had
good
four
move.
children of her own.
Not marrying George.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder how,
Yeah.
how George made out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like that, the original drummer for the Beatles.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
hope he's doing okay.
Yeah.
I think he ended up getting like 2 million pounds at one point, the first drummer for the Beatles.
Oh, the
They
drummer.
ended up
Yeah.
they ended up
Yeah.
looking after him. But yeah, that's got to be tough. Watching Beatlemania happen, you're like,
Oh, man. Yeah.
damn, people gonna feel that way when we get on Rogan. I tell you what. Um, so he goes back to Oxford. I mean, he was there for his wife and his wife's happiness. And Oxford, they're giving him honor after honor after honor. And then Oxford would eventually like kind of take care of him. I think they put him up in housing. Um, as the summer of 1973 advanced, some of those close to him thought that he was more sad than usual and seemed to be aging faster. Yet the diet had apparently been successful. He goes on a diet. And in July, he went to Cambridge for a dinner, an InterVarsity dining club. In August, he wrote a note of thanks. Dear Daniel, it is a long time since July 20th, but better, I hope, late than never, to do what I should have done before being immersed in other matters. To thank you for your delightful dinner in St. John's, and especially for your forbearance and great kindness to me personally. It proved a turning point. I suffered no ill effects whatever, and have since been able to dispense with most of the diet taboos I had to observe for some 6 months. I look forward to the next dinner and hope you will be present. Yours ever, Ronald Tolkien. There's one more little bit here. I don't know if I mean, he's being feted. I mean, he's world famous. I mean, I sort of missed the retirement speech. There were nods to his mythology in the retirement speech, but it was principally about his philological work, right? There's sort of a strange dynamic, right? We're all meeting as colleagues in academia. You just happen to write a very, very popular novel.
Yeah. You're the most famous because of your little
Yeah,
side project. Yeah.
yeah, your literary dabblings. Lewis, and maybe you'll cover this in yours. Lewis wrote a gushing review of The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe you can cover that. 3 days after writing that letter I just read, on the 28th of August, he traveled to Bournemouth to stay with some friends, his doctor and his wife who'd looked after him, and Edith when they had lived there. And then the end comes on the Thursday. He joined in celebrations to mark Mrs. Tolhurst's birthday, but he did not feel well and would not eat much, though he drank a little champagne. During the night, he was in pain, and next morning he was taken to a private hospital where an acute bleeding gastric ulcer was diagnosed. It so happened that Michael was on a holiday in Switzerland and Christopher in France, and neither could have reached his bedside in time. But John and Priscilla were able to come down to Bournemouth to be with him. At first, the reports on his condition were optimistic, but by Saturday, a chest infection had developed, and early on that Sunday morning, 2nd of December, 1973, J.R.R. Tolkien died, aged 81. And that is the life and work of J.R.R. Tolkien. Got a little coda here, and it's about their grave. Um, They were married 55 years before she passed away. Um, in a 1972 letter to Christopher, his son, Tolkien asked that Edith's grave bear the name Luthien. He wrote that, for she was and knew she was my Luthien. He also recalled her dancing for him in a woodland glade during the First World War period. So this is not mythology imposed. This is him edifying the marriage. And then here's a quote. I never called Edith Luthien, but she was the source of the story that in time became the chief part of the Silmarillion. It was first conceived in a small woodland glade filled with hemlocks at Roos in Yorkshire, where I was for a brief time in command of an outpost of the Humber garrison in 1917, and she was able to live with me for a while. In those days, her hair was raven, her skin clear, her eyes brighter than you have seen them, and she could sing and dance. But the story has gone crooked, and I am left and I cannot plead before the inexorable Mandos. And if you want to look up the story of Baron and Luthien, Luthien and Baron, his headstone has Barian on it, and hers has Luthien on it, and it's part of the mythos of the Silmarillion. I'm going to read from the end of the biography, then I'm going to tease the After Dark, then I'm going to ask you the question, the closing question. And then we'll take a break and come back and do another hour on the After Dark for our dear supporters. Let's see here. Really a good, great biography. I've read a lot of biographies for this podcast, and I can't recommend J.R.R. Tolkien, A Biography by Humphrey Carter, enough. All right. So let's see here. Where did it come from, this imagination that peopled Middle-earth with elves, orcs, and hobbits? What was the source of the literary vision that changed the life of this obscure scholar? And why did that vision so strike the minds and harmonize with the aspirations of numberless readers around the world? Tolkien would have thought that these were unanswerable questions, certainly unanswerable in a book of this sort, biography. He disapproved of biography as an aid to literary appreciation, and perhaps he was right. His real biography is The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and The Silmarillion, for the truth about him lies within their pages, but at least he might allow an epitaph. His Requiem Mass was held in Oxford 4 days after his death in the plain modern church in Headington, which he had attended so often. The prayers and readings were specifically chosen by his son John, who said the Mass with the assistance of Tolkien's old friend, Father Robert Murray, and his parish priest, Duran. So I believe John must have become a Catholic priest. There was no sermon, or that is the sign of a good Catholic. If one of your sons becomes a priest, you take it seriously. You're not phoning it in. Not a cafeteria Catholic there. There was no sermon. I think the word you're looking for is homily. I don't know, or quotation from his writings. However, when a few weeks later a memorial service was held in California by some of his American admirers, his short story "Leaf by Niggle" was read to the congregation. And I think Leaf by Niggle is a story where there's like an artist who's in a world where art is not appreciated. It's part of what Leaf by Niggle is about. Was read to the congregation. He would perhaps have considered it not inappropriate. Before him stood the tree, his tree, finished. If you could say that of a tree that was alive, its leaves opening, its branches growing and bending in the wind that Niggle had so often felt and guessed and had so often failed to catch. He gazed at the tree, and slowly he lifted his arms and opened them wide. It's a gift, he said. And that is it. What do you think Tolkien would be doing now?
Think expanding on the mythology, buried in his work.
Yep.
Good podcast guest if you could get him, but I bet
Yep.
he's hesitant to do it because he's sick of everybody asking him about the movies.
Yeah. I truly wonder what he would have made of the movies.
I bet he wouldn't have liked them,
Mm,
just because it's too personal and there's no way to capture it. Kind of like how Christopher feels about the movies. Probably, I would guess. But
mm.
once again, you mentioned the Beatles in the '60s. The Beatles either bought or tried to buy the rights to Lord of the Rings, and there were plans to have them star as each of the four hobbits.
Whoa.
So if you think of just how bad that would have been,
Yeah.
and
We
the other
we really dodged
versions,
a bullet. Yeah.
I mean, so the movies were about as good as we're gonna get.
I
There could have been
agree.
some very, very bad movies out there.
Yeah,
So
and then there's that animation, the original
not half
hot.
bad. They
Yeah,
never the Lord of the Ring, the Ralph Bashki Lord of the Rings, which I think Sam Ernst is gonna talk about a little bit. That's cool, but they never finished it. They got like almost to Helm's Deep, and then the original, the best version of the Hobbit that exists on film is the cartoon
yeah, the
of
1977. Yeah.
yeah, voice John Huston does Gandalf, like that version is about as good as we have.
Yeah, yeah,
But
rip a bong and then go watch that.
yeah, yeah.
All right, we are going to be back. We're going to do some fun stuff on the After Dark. It's going to be a long one. If you value this show, support the show. Go to patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. That really is the only way we can keep doing this. You will get this episode ad free and all the core episodes henceforth ad free. We got a lot of good stuff. We're doing 13 core episodes this year. Next year is going to be our 27 Club Summer too. So we're already thinking about next year. We got a lot of good stuff for you. We got dark rooms coming up, some bigger guests. All our guests are big. All our guests are big people, including the hobbits. If you come on a dark room, you bow to no man, especially not the two of us. All right, so this is going to be fun. Let me just tease what we're going to do on the After Dark. I got to go back to the top of my outline, this 20-page outline that I have. And just remember, all the single
Put
ladies. God, listen, it's out there. That's low-hanging fruit for an essay. So we're going to talk about his Catholicism. We're going to talk about why he wanted to build a body of legend for England. We're going to talk about Tom Bombadil. We're going to take the Bomba pill. We'll talk a little more about the Inklings. We'll talk about a little more about C.S. Lewis without stealing Matt's thunder. And then we're going to talk about all the songs inspired by J.R.R. Tolkien in Led Zeppelin. We're going to get the let out. Frodo lives.